Okay,
waiting for the Stormkeep.
I think we are live. Check the audio first, real quick, because we've had problems with that every time we stream, it seems.
I don't know why it's so hard.
Because I'm like a boomer, basically. Like, I just don't understand technology. It's my fault. How you doing, everybody? I
Well,
hope you can hear us.
yeah, James Mergonkjack, you guys wanna give some audio?
Yeah,
I
hey,
can hear me in
Yeah.
all.
audio. Second audio.
I was going
Hope
to focus
everything's
on the
still
one.
working.
Cool. I hear it, so I think we're good.
Sweet. Okay. Let's get our sponsorship out of the way so then we can talk about the fantastic painting contest that we had because I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely huge, awesome, our only sponsor, but an awesome group of people out of Orlando, Florida. KaijuGamingLounge.com is a great source for all your wargaming needs, whether it's, GW stuff, upcoming Shatterpoint, different war games, as well as custom gaming tools that they will be able to do. And speaking of that, they do our Deep Strike sticks. We have a 9-inch and 7-inch side Deep Strike stick, just like it's shown in the picture you're seeing here. My Annihilator's about to charge that awesome Bloodthirster. Cool print from my boy Noel. It just popped up. You can see our faces. They have our Deep Strike sticks. They come in those 3 different colors, as well as if you want to have them pre-painted that gold, you can have them pre-painted that gold. There's an option for that. Or if you want to leave it unpainted, they'll come with the sticker still on it. You can paint them with legit model paint or spray paint, whatever you want to do, and you can have your own custom color in that. The clear looks really slick. Clear is one of my favorites. I don't have my other sticks available, but Carl does some other awesome stuff like my tau measuring tool, different widgets. So check them out on Kaiju Gaming Lounge, and if you make an order from them, and our dice, of course. I think there's still a couple dice left. I think there's like 5 sets left.
Not
But
many.
they're going, so yeah. Check them out, but use code Stormkeep for 15% off at checkout. And if you're an international person, as in outside of the states, of course, just get with Carl and he'll be able to help you out with international shipping. You can DM him on Discord, just at Kaiju Gaming Lounge in our Discord, and you'll be able to find him.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm really glad we still have this partnership with Kaiju. They're fantastic. Having these painting contests every month for this year has been a lot of fun. So
Yeah,
full steam ahead.
you guys are really talented.
So that's an excellent segue into talking about our painting contest. This is the best one we've ever done, right? Like, this is amazing. We had so many amazing entries. April 2023's painting contest was Big Dragons. Let me fix this overlay real quick.
I was going to say.
Yeah. I had it all set up, and then Jack joined last minute. Just ruined everything for everyone. All right, let's just go wider.
I can leave if I'm screwing everything up.
No, don't worry about it. It's fine. It's fine. So we decided that we wanted to paint some big dragons, and we thought, hey, let's get the community to paint some big dragons as well. And we had some incredible entries, absolutely phenomenal. It was really hard to pick the winners. We had a lot of excellent entries from people that have done fantastic work for our contest in the past, but also tons of new people posting for the first time, which was really, really satisfying. If you want to see all of them, go ahead and check out our Discord server. They're in the Painting Big Dragon channel. That will be available at any time. So no matter when you watch this stream, you can always go check out those entries. We are going to give out some prizes at the end of this. We will contact the winners, and they will get their choice of a box of Dracothian Guard, a Stormstrike Chariot, or a Knight Judicator. Anything you guys want to say before we go into honorable mentions?
It was really tough. This one was definitely really tough. A lot of cool stuff. It's a centerpiece model, so a lot of people really went all out, and that made it harder than normal. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's start taking a look at our honorable mentions. So first up is this piece from Edom 2022 or 22. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Edom, something like that. But this is just excellent color composition, right? This like matte green contrasted with this darker red. The tone is just perfect on this model. The metal is done in this non-metallic metal, which looks very good. The base complements this model very well. It kind of ties into the gold on the cuffs and everything. So this is just really well done. I wish I had a zoomed in shot here on the scales, but each one has been highlighted meticulously. This is a beautiful, beautiful work. I'm very happy to show this in our honorable mentions.
Hey, he's in the chat too. Thanks, Eduardo, for your submission. This is really great work. I love this. It's absolutely very technical work, and the basing is actually like, if I'm going to be honest, I think it was my favorite basing of the whole lot.
Mm-hmm. It looks really nice. Tons of like, I'm assuming that was like a green stuff roller. There's lots of bits thrown on there. Like this is almost not. It's barely using the default bits here. The base was almost entirely kit bashed, and it looks really nice. So, congratulations on making the honorable mentions. Moving on. We have this entry from Sir Mercury, and this is...
This is on theme. That's what this is, on theme.
So we allow reasonable proxies in our contest, right? If we have a contest about painting paladins, you can put in some 3D print stuff, like we don't mind, as long as somebody in a game would recognize that as a paladin, that's fine. So when we said, hey, we want big dragons, he asked if you could submit this as a Star Drake. And I said, yeah, I would accept that as a Star Drake on the table, right? Like it's got a Lord Celestant riding on top of it. It's a dragon lizard thing, technically. What's up, Anthony?
What's going on, everybody?
Didn't know you were joining us on the stream.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, it's a primal Star Drake is what it is.
Yeah, this thing looks awesome. Like, look at all the details in kit bashing. There's pieces from, like, ogre kits. There's, like, Seraphon bits attached to his helmet to make it look like an ornate helmet. Like, this looks really cool. There's a lot of also...
He's like, someone lost his ability to get back to Azir, so he's just camping out, like, Robin Williams and Jumanji in, like, the Seraphon Forest for, like, a year or two.
Yeah, the Gryph-hound's cool on the base, and, like, the little, I guess, owl or something perching on the rock there. Add that extra little bit of flavor. Like, this guy's just got, like, a whole just plethora of animals chasing him.
He's gone native, for sure.
Yeah. But look at all the details in the basing, right? Like, he's got a complete water feature along the bottom. He's got this large stone with corals coming out of it. There's a crazy amount of detail added to this model, so definitely gets an honorable mention from us.
A lot of patience there, too. Working with the water resin can be tricky sometimes, so good on you.
Because you got to put that on, like, millimeter by millimeter, right? Like, it takes a long time to build that up.
You can do
the only thing I'll say is I wish this was Astral Templar colors.
Yeah, right?
Like,
that would
straight
be
up
just
like
a little
that.
bit more on theme.
Astral Templar Maroon or whatever. Burgundy, whatever you want to say.
It's great. I think I could name most of the bits used here. Like, there's pieces from ogre kits, from the stone horns in particular. There's Seraphon. Where's that spear from? That's an ogre spear, isn't it?
That's an ogre spear, yeah.
Yeah, that's the stone horn spear.
What is
stuff, man?
Yeah, this looks great. I love it. Congratulations, Sir Mercury. This looks fantastic. Our next one here is from not a stranger from our painting contest at all. Andreas SCE puts out another banger, and I think our criticism of his previous piece has definitely been incorporated very well here. The only thing we ever have to criticize you over are your bases. I always say they're like a little bit flat with just a bit of cork, and this is fantastic, dude. You really did a great job sprucing this base up.
It.
Yeah, the extra 3D elements of like having more levels on this guy looks great. Tons of tufts. You've incorporated more stones and everything into the cork. This looks great, dude. And then I just wanted to also highlight just what a great paint job this is, right? Like, Andreas is a fantastic painter. His style always looks good. Now, I've honestly never seen him paint anything that wasn't Stormcast armor, so seeing him paint flesh and scales and things like that is a treat. Especially with this like source lighting that he's done here. You can see on the right side picture on his flank. Looks awesome.
It's super subtle, but it looks amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that. And he did a great job on the Dracolines. I mean, we've seen him do that, and that was also like the flex and everything he did, like the specs on each of the Dracolines. And that goes to show here, like he made everything look very natural. Very, he went for the realistic look on the wings, and I do appreciate that. Really given those cracks of colors, that flesh feel. That's just really good. And yeah, the source lighting from the fire there is really good, and I like the little fire pillar because it's like it reminds me of the Bastion base.
Oh yeah, put this guy next to Bastion. It looks like just a natural progression, right?
Yeah,
it's awesome.
One thing I'll say before we move on, if we're seeing Andreas in the honorable mentions, we know this is a stiff competition at the end of the day.
Yep.
Yeah, we have a couple for
It,
sure.
it's very difficult to think to take, like, you can have a style that works really well. You can paint armor really well and paint flesh really well, but it's a completely different thing to paint first off a model at this scale, and also a model made of scales, right? It's a very different technique that has to get applied. Like, his armor here is immaculate, like always, fantastic style. But he also nailed the natural looking, like, leathery flesh on the inside of the dragon scales. Just great work overall. Our next honorable mention goes to Oni no Iga. I think I got that wrong, but that's okay, I guess. Moving on. Fantastic work on this Krondis. Beautiful work on all the metal, beautiful work on the skin and the scales. They're all very well highlighted, but I'm also just a big sucker for fancy bases, obviously. And this is about as fancy as it comes, right? Like, it's got great, like, what would you call it? Motion. Like, you can feel like this thing, like the waves are hitting it, and he's like just perching on, so because he's ready to go attack something. Like, really awesome, epic kind of moment that you've created here.
Yeah, it's well animated. I think that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, it's got a good motion to it. It's telling a story just from looking at it, and that's kind of what a big centerpiece model like this deserves, especially Krondis, right? Who's like he's an intelligent creature. He's not a beast, so he's taking his time. He's carefully looking at the battlefield. He's looking for his next target. Like, this tells a story. And in addition to that, it's technically executed very well here. The slight fade from the innermost part of the wings to the outermost part, like that gradient is very well done. The scales are all beautifully highlighted. Fantastic work overall. The only criticism I have is that just that top part of I don't know what this is made of, but it kind of looks like cork, right? But just that top part is a little bit too flat. It's like unnaturally a little bit too flat. But given how amazing everything looks, it's like a very minor criticism.
I think it would have been okay being that flat if the cork actually like ended at the base, so it made it feel like it was the tip of the cliff face rather than being like a random jut of some little, like nature. Obviously it's ruins, but I think it would have made more I don't know, it would be a little bit more visual appealing if it was like the side of a cliff face. Not that I could do any better. You did an awesome job. Thank you, dude. This is awesome.
It is. It's really well done.
It's missing one thing, though. Absolutely one thing. He's missing a fishing pole.
Yeah.
A little fishing hat.
Actually would have just won if he had a fishing pole. Would have won.
Yep,
Fishing is
won.
the best part of any video game, just saying.
Exactly.
I didn't know you were Japanese, Dan. Okay, next up, we've got this molten skin on a melting base Karazai from MacTac. This is I've always wanted to try a molten pattern. I've always looked up painting guides and everything for how to do it, and it's just like it just sounds so time consuming and intimidating to do it. But this is awesome. I don't know what else to say about it. The base is beautiful. The model's beautiful. It's such a distinct style. Like, yeah, man, this is great.
If only he was like at a good points value to be able to be allied into like Fire Slayers. This would be so cool.
I know. Yeah.
Well, you can get the Fire Slayer experience and bring this guy in 2 gun haulers. That's pretty much the same thing.
Don't know anybody who does that.
Oh yeah.
I wonder.
This is fantastic, MacTac. Thank you very much for putting this into our contest. I love the orange to like the black to red to orange to yellow transition is done very well here. The gradient is very smooth across the wings.
I should send my Fire Slayer invitations to this man.
Looks great, man.
It really looks like, honestly, like since the last OBR review, it looks like the crematoriums on the darker parts of the scales. It looks really awesome.
Yeah. Very acty. I like it.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're not in Actually right now, but who knows? Maybe we'll go back there someday. Next up, we have an honorable mention from rstone2420. Sometimes just a simple default color scheme, almost like this is the box color scheme, but sometimes that's what you need, man. It looks great. A well executed box scheme. There's nothing wrong with that at all. The silver armor also is a nice touch. I actually really like that. the silver armor with like black tones ties into the cloth on the shoulder pads on this guy, on the Drake, and then it ties into the horns on the helmet too. Like all three elements are tied together, and the model just flows really nicely. It's a pleasure to look at.
Yeah, I just love how this is like the essence of Hammers of Sigmar Star Drake, right? Like, you
Yeah.
say those words, this is the picture that comes to mind.
Yeah, classic blue and red. That's how I've got mine painted, which you can see there, right there.
I don't think people will necessarily be able to see it from where you are, but
That's how I did mine.
no.
Blue scales and red wings. So it's a classic scheme. It works.
Yeah.
Fire effect
Great.
on the inside of the mouth is executed well. It's a great piece. So
if you look closely,
Same
you'll see
look,
the
man.
Night Judicator in the
Same
mouth.
Yeah, there's a Night Judicator somewhere right about here.
Oh, Dan, the camera's turned off right now.
Ah, rip. Okay.
Sorry,
never
buddy.
mind. I can't see the stream right now. So.
Robert in the chat says you guys get some top-notch submissions, and I completely agree. I'm blown away by our community. Like,
Thanks, dude.
we're so lucky to have people this talented that
Yeah.
that want to come submit to our contest. That's amazing.
Yeah, if you guys join our Discord, we leave these open in like a little archive section, so you can go back and reference. You know, if you want to paint up some Dracoths, some Evocators, or one of these models, you can go back and reference what other people did.
Mhm.
You know, check out our Discord.
Yeah,
button.
all the way back to our first painting contest, the Knight Relictor, when he was just a meme and not a potentially viable model. And I believe this is our last honorable mention here from... You guys want to take a stab at the name? I feel like I've embarrassed myself too much.
Nope,
Okay.
I got nothing.
All right.
I thought that was a U with an umlaut, but it's
Seasazan, she's Asian, I don't know. Beautiful Karazai. The lightning effect makes it look like this guy was just whipped with lightning. The fact that you've painted it going up all the way around his face, around the glowing blue eye, looks fantastic. Not in addition, like that's eye-catching, right? But just the model itself is also just executed very well. The base is awesome. I love the multiple layers of depth to the base, right? Like I love layers on bases. Everything being flat just kind of looks weird. The scales are done very well. You can see a lot of effort went into ensuring a smooth gradient across the darker scales around his shoulder blades and his arms and his legs. The interior pattern is done very well. You can see there is some very subtle depth there. It's not just a flat color. Just an excellent Karazai with this fantastic looking lightning gash across the face.
Mm-hmm. I literally, when I first saw this, I thought that he had done some kind of lighting trick. That's how well done it is.
It looks like a filter, right? Like some kind of Instagram filter or something.
Yeah. That's crazy.
kind of reminds me of Ziggy Stardust a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Very, very nice work, though.
Yeah.
And I believe
All right.
that takes us to...
I gotta go, guys.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for coming,
Okay,
Jack. Have a
okay.
good night, buddy.
Yeah, you too. Sorry.
No problem. Okay, so I believe we can move on to our third place.
Yeah.
So our third place entry is from KevCat, who has a phenomenal looking Drake, Lord Celestin on Star Drake. I keep saying Drakesworn because that's all I've been using lately. But this is a beautiful looking Star Drake. Every scale has been touched properly with a fine detail brush. Everything is edge highlighted very nicely. It's got a great little kit bash for the head to make it look more dynamic, to just give it a better sense of just motion as this model's moving forward. Just excellent work. I really love the Star Drake model. We do not get to see enough Star Drakes on the table. Look at the detailing on the tongue.
Yeah.
You can even see there's like little notches in the tongue. It's just
Yeah, and he's
Super
used the Guard of Steel Soul head, I think. I'm pretty sure that's the Guard of Steel Soul head.
I think that's a Vanguard Palador. I could be wrong.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It looked like Guard of Steel Soul for a
It
bit.
does at
But
first,
yeah,
right?
yeah. But no, yeah, I love the details. It's really crisp. Like he's went in and highlighted like every single scale, which, my God, man, that's incredible.
I did that for a
Yeah.
Magma Droth once. I'm not doing that again.
Yeah, no.
Look at the fine edge highlights on the armor plates, right? Like he's got like 3 different colors going on. He's got a general highlight and then a finer highlight, and then just at the tips he's got this little hint of white. Love stuff like that. It looks great.
Yeah, This is this is amazing. It's really clean work.
He's also got a matching display board, which that's not worth any points in our contest or anything, but it's just extra mile.
Yeah,
That
it's
looks
good to
awesome.
see.
Yeah.
Good to see.
So fantastic work, KevCat. We'll be in touch to figure out prizes for you. Our second place is from White Paints, who is not a stranger to our contest at all, and he has really done something spectacular here. Where do we start? Well, the base has like what would you call this? Like a Chinese bridge, Chinese architecture style
Japanese garden
of some kind. Yeah, it's some kind, and there's actually a water feature going under there. I wish I had more space on this slide to fit it. There's a custom flag post. There's a beautifully painted dragon on it. If I haven't mentioned that yet, and then he's also got like a guard on the bridge with this like beautiful shiny red glossy armor. Tons of colors, all highlighted fantastically. The detail, I love what he's done with the back of the wings, like that kind of like pattern going up the back of it looks fantastic, especially with those colors. Like orange and purple is hard to make work together, but he does it very well. And then, just in case you missed it, on the inside of the wings, if you look real close, there's teeny tiny little freehand prosecutors painted in there. That's a squad of 3 prosecutors that are painted into the wings, in addition to like this starfall and exploding meteors and all this stuff going on.
Wow.
So, what a mad lad. He just freehand painted a tiny squad of prosecutors inside there. That's crazy.
Doesn't even care. Just does it.
Yep. So there's so much going on with this that I love. It's fantastic work. I think, for me personally, I think the green is a little bit too much color on the model. I think without that green on the dragon scales, this whole piece is tied together better. It looks a little out of place, but it's all done so well. It's hard to even find a complaint,
Well, there's not too much of the green, and it complements with the red at the end of the day, so I think it's fine where it is.
Mm-hmm. There's so much color on this already. Yeah, that would be my only criticism. The base is great. Everything looks gorgeous. The freehand work, like, unbelievably good freehand work. I couldn't even attempt this. That's no way.
Nope.
Yeah, this is extremely technically proficient.
Mm-hmm. So beautiful work, White Paints. Congratulations on another win in our painting contest, and we'll be in touch for your prizes. So if that was second place, you got to wonder what took first, right?
First place, wow.
First place is this beautifully patterned Krondis model from Yoji. And I assume it's Krondis, but technically, it could be Karazai. It doesn't have the regalia around its neck or anything, which is smart. You got to build
friendship bracelet.
Yeah, it doesn't have the Sigmar friendship bracelet. But this is beautiful. The transition from blues to purples to pinks is like something you'd see in the Zinch army, like on a Lord of Change. You can see there's spotted patterns on the back of it, and then on the inside there's this gorgeous pattern on the inside of the wings that's like, I hadn't seen anything like that on a Stormcast model before. So that was fantastic. And then the base, if we can just take a second to talk about the base, it's gorgeous, right? Like there's so much going on, but it's all muted colors. It's all kind of pale browns, pale oranges, pale greens, and it matches in with his whole display board that he's got going on. I was worried it was going to be a little bit too busy, but I think he's covered it with enough flock that it kind of just does a good job of looking good, but not standing out too much. So it looks great.
A lot of people don't necessarily color in with a lot of contrast, at least the Sigmar comment on his chest, and I love that feature here. It really helped to break up that middle chest area, so it's not just a regular flat underbelly. It actually
it does look really good. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, it stands out.
A lot of people don't do that. I didn't paint that on mine.
Yeah, Yoji has this very nice shade of blue that uses all across his Hammers of Sigmar, and it's like distinctly, that shade of blue. I can always see like, that's
very vibrant.
That's Yoji's work. Yeah.
And I love the fall leaves that he puts on all of his bases. It's really well done here. I love that he broke up one of the Sigmar statues just to make this base work.
Yeah.
That's one of the Sigmar.
Oh yeah, that's the one. Yeah. That's my Annihilator Prayer statue. That's what gives me the 7s on the charge.
That's what gives you the 7s, yeah. So
Well, hey guys, we got a new YouTube member. Thanks, Luis Mendoza. Welcome aboard, buddy. Make sure you're in the Discord so you can get access to all your perks.
Thanks, man. Much appreciated.
Yeah, so Yoji, fantastic work. Like, I can't believe you went through and highlighted all these scales. Like, just crazy.
That freehand pattern, man, under the wings. My God.
I gotta
I
know
love
if it's
the
a
dappling
stencil.
on the top.
It could be. Maybe it is a
could be,
gradient,
but
like
it's-
a gradient stencil with an airbrush. It could
It's
be.
still well done. Like it doesn't,
Yeah,
change
yeah.
anything. Like
No, it's still very creative. You don't see
Yeah.
people like do that. Like I usually see that
dappling
in
on the top
40K
is
for
awesome.
vehicle patterns.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
It does
the
look like a
scale
40K
highlight.
stencil, but you know what? It looks great because you wouldn't
Yeah.
expect something like that across like this kind of fleshy surface that you're trying to make look more organic, and then you add this like almost machined pattern on top of it, and it works because it's like a big magical dragon, right? Like there's no
Yeah,
laws.
it looks celestial, right? And this is Krondus, the celestial.
He said it
Dragon.
wasn't a stencil.
Ooh,
Yeah.
very
Wow.
impressive then.
Actual, yeah. Whew, mad lad.
Holy
Even if it was, it's still a great idea. But
my God.
man, that's even more impressive.
That's
There
really good.
there were so many fantastic entries in this contest.
Yes.
I had a short list of like 10 that I wanted to include as honorable mentions.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
We have a lot
it
more
was
honorable
tough.
mentions in this video, definitely. And
That's
it's
tough,
a centerpiece model, so you're definitely gonna have, awesome stuff from people.
Yeah, but it's not just about like technical prowess though, right? Like the criteria we judge models on is whatever we like for whatever reason we like. And there were just a lot of models that I really liked in this.
Yeah.
So congratulations to all the winners. Thank you everybody who submitted. I'm like blown away that we have such an awesome community.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's time to get down to the meat, though. What people are here for.
Well,
is...
let me just announce our
Oh,
next
true. Yeah.
painting contest. And also Anthony can say hello to people because he just popped into the Discord while we were streaming. Our next painting contest for May 2023 is Dracothian Guard. So if you have a fully painted unit of Dracothian Guard, any kind, it can be Tempesters, Concussors, Fulminators, or Desolators. If for some reason you have Desolators, drop it into our Discord server and you have a chance to win fabulous prizes. The contest runs until May 31st at 11:59 p.m. Eastern, and I look forward to seeing what you guys got. Everybody loves Dracoths, right? Best unit in the book.
Hell yeah. Oh, you got a request, Paul, to share your short list. I told them you'd do it in the Discord.
Sure. Yeah, there's like at least 5 more that weren't able to make it onto the slides today because we do have a time limit, unfortunately.
Yeah, we can only do so much, and we got to get down to the meat, to the real issue.
All right. So here's what we are going to be talking about today. Main topic of the evening is power creep. The topic has come up because Age of Sigmar 3rd Edition has received, how would you phrase it, an explosion of new battletomes this year. And it seemed like...
content release.
Sorry?
Accelerated content release.
There's been a lot. Yep. Very rapid. We had 6 books in 3 months? 4 months? It's a lot. It's a lot of books. We're used to getting like 3 per year in this game. Like that was kind of the tempo in 1st and 2nd edition. Like you barely got battletomes, and now it's like every army in a year and a half. Okay, cool. But there seems to be a pattern that people have picked up on, and a lot of people are calling that pattern power creep. And I think we're going to discuss what power creep is, whether or not what we're seeing in Age of Sigmar qualifies as that, whether power creep is good or bad, and what the implications are going forwards. So I hope this is interesting. We're going to try to take an analytical approach to this. This is not going to be, just us complaining how the latest book is ridiculous. Nerf everything. No, that's
past heroes are overcosted.
They are,
not
but we're not going to complain too much about that. There will be a section at the end where everybody can scream into a pillow about Caradron Overlords, and obviously the chat agrees based on our poll right now that Caradron is in fact the strongest army by a mile. Like it's not even close. They're so strong, it's ridiculous. All right, so what is power creep? Power creep, as I've created a definition here, and you guys can add to it or push back on this if you like. But I view it as a process that occurs over time when new content is released in a game that's incrementally more powerful than previous alternatives. Basically, stuff gets more powerful over time. Players seeing this tend to abandon the previous options in favor of the newer options because players always want to, for the most part, they want to have the best possible chance at winning. Most players, I'd say, not everyone. Some people just play what they like, and those people are the real winners. Honestly, they don't need time. They don't have time for this video. But in general, players will rotate to whatever is currently better, right? Like people won't make lists that are just a bunch of Vanguard hunters, for example, right? Like that's not a great list. You want the best chance possible winning. You're going to use the best options for that. And if new options are stronger than old options, well, you're going to use the new options. Budget permitting, of course. It's an expensive game. The new options then become the standard. This is now the new paradigm, and everything has to be compared to this paradigm. And the old options, therefore, are considered too weak. It's not that the new stuff is good; it's that the old stuff is bad. And I don't think there's any way to avoid that feeling, because that's just how people are, right? Whatever standard you set, you could set the average number of damage that a unit does is 100, and then next year if it's 150, well, 150 is now the standard, and then 100 is just that unit's trash, you don't need it. So to illustrate this is the best example ever, I think. Looking at Hearthstone, if anybody's familiar with that game, it was kind of a big deal a few years ago. On the left is one of the cards originally introduced in Hearthstone. It's called the Magma Rager. It is a 3 mana cost minion with 5 attack and 1 health. You don't really need to know what that means, but it's very obvious to see that. I think in what set was this? I think this was Argent Tournament or something. They released
the Grand Tournament.
The Grand Tournament, yeah. And this wasn't even that far off. This was maybe a year into the game. They've released
the third expansion.
Yeah. So this is the Ice Rager, who is exactly the same in every single way, except he has 1 more health. And ironically, neither of these guys was strong enough to see play. They were both terrible cards, and nobody used them. But the point is demonstrated here. This is what power creep looks like, right?
Yeah. I think it's important to just talk about it as it's just more powerful. We're not necessarily saying this is just bad as a baseline, because there's other ways to balance, and that's what we really want to get into. Is that power creep has it's nuanced, right? It's not black and white.
There are positive aspects to power creep, and we'll talk about them. So, I guess we talk about why power creep occurs. What exactly are the reasons driving power creep? Well, for starters, it's a game. You're trying to make money, right? And excitement is one of the ways that people can drive sales and keep the game interesting. Returning customers want to be excited about new products. If a new book comes out for Warhammer and the book is just trash, nobody cares. It doesn't cause any kind of discussion. It's almost like it didn't happen, right? And that's not very fun. You want new things to be happening, especially if you're an established regular player, if you're a whale like me. You spend a lot of time and money on this game. You want to be excited about new things, right? And that feeds into sales, right? People get excited, they buy new armies, they buy new models, they buy new cards, they buy new, I don't know, heroes in a gacha game, all this stuff, right? This stuff is a key way that people make money. If a new product is weaker than an old product, there is nothing to be excited about. So why would anybody buy it? If you get your army gets an update, it gets a new unit, but the unit sucks, who cares, right? Oh, you got an Underworld's Warband, cool. It's 275 points, and it has a spell that casts on an 8, and you don't have any bonuses. You don't get excited about that, right?
Remember when Gardas first released?
Yeah, he was terrible. He was just awful.
Him and the Cruciator, man.
Yep. And that's a tragedy. Frankly, every model should have cool, fun rules. Another reason power creep occurs is that designers are people, and people get better at things over time, right? Nobody is a perfect game designer, especially when you're updating rules so frequently. You're creating new additions, you're creating new expansions, you're having discussions about how the game should be going, you're reacting to things. But in general, let's say designers get better at writing interesting and creative rules, right? They have limited time to design and test. They have deadlines that they need to meet. Sometimes their designs miss the mark. Sometimes they're a little too conservative, but other times they go a little too far. But in general, they get better at designing stuff over time. Let's say a new edition of Warhammer comes out, 3rd edition, and they have this core rule set, and they're exploring ways to expand that rule set. You can see this kind of design flow through it. You can see, Stormcast books get a lot of free command points, right? We've got heroes like the Lord Imperator. We've got a 1-drop battalion. So they're kind of looking at the core rules and saying, oh, it would be cool if this army did these things with this army. We've got some things that replace monstrous rampages instead of having our own rampages, which is a prototype of what you'd see later in the books, where you just get different rampages. And you can see all the way, as a through line, all the way to the current books that we have, there's armies that just have their own heroic actions. They have their own monstrous rampages. The Seraphon book is probably one of the most complex ones in terms of army construction. It's basically 2 different armies, and each one of them has 2 different sub-factions. There's 2 different spell lores, 2 different artifacts. Like, there's completely different styles, right? So they're getting better at writing the rules for 3rd edition. They usually, when they design stuff like this, they have an internal roadmap more or less of like, this is where we want to keep the power level, roughly, right? But when you mix it in with the first point, well, that power level is going to creep up a little bit over time, right? Even if you try your best to stick it, you just get excited as a designer. You're like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we had a rule that when this unit's within 3 inches, you just can't receive commands? Yeah, that's so cool. That would be so awesome. Let's print that as a rule and put it in the game. And this is assuming, of course, no malicious action from these designers, right? We're thinking these guys are just doing their best. They like their jobs. They want to make a great game. Sometimes, though, there's like the problem of maybe they're being told to do this. This was definitely the case in Games Workshop previously, where I think the most infamous one was the Riptide in 7th edition 40K. There's interviews out there, so I think this is public knowledge, but like the designers were told, no, undercost this model, like cut 100 points off it or whatever. We need people to buy a bunch of these, right? Like purposeful power creep was done there to drive sales, and that caused a short-term problem. Like short-term, it generated sales, but long-term, it ruined the credibility of the game, and they had to completely like destroy it with 8th edition, and they've just been slowly building it back up since then. And I think finally with 10th edition, maybe they've learned the right lessons.
We'll see how that goes.
Mm-hmm. And I think the final big reason why power creep occurs, frankly, is that creating a balanced game is really hard. It's like to create a game as balanced as, say, StarCraft 1 is really, really difficult. And it's especially if you're working on it over a long period of time and you're releasing portions of the game piecemeal, like in Warhammer, where you put out a couple books, you work on the next batch, you release them, you put out another couple books, you release them, and so on and so on. It's really difficult to just nail that on the first try. And we're not really dealing with a video game here where we can patch things over time. As easily, right? Like, there's a lot of downsides to patching Warhammer. It comes through erratas, which are not, they're just inconvenient, they're clunky, people can miss them, it just causes arguments. But, go ahead.
Oh, I was thinking someone starts off, you have the book, you read it, just like, I think it was like a week ago, I had someone in the chat being like, wow, why don't I see people take, Master Celestial Menagerie? And, it's things like that cause difficulty when you're trying to get into the game, where you're like, how come I bought this book, but now it's different? And that's really where it's easy to patch in the sense that you could just put out an errata, right? Like every week if you really wanted to. But that's just going to lead to other issues because of the way the game is built.
Yeah, it's not like a video game client where you have to download the latest patch in order to play the game, right? Like there are people out there who play without errata. They just play with the book the way it's written, and that's it. So they're having a great time with Stormcast right now.
Yeah.
I'll say this. I'm gonna go a different direction with that point. I'm gonna say it's not hard to make a balanced game. It's harder than it looks.
Yes.
To make a balanced game.
I'm gonna even push it further. I'm gonna say a balanced game is not necessarily the goal of the players or the designers. The ultimate goal is to have a fun game that you want to keep playing. Balance is secondary to that.
You don't want an imbalanced game, but you don't want a perfectly balanced game either.
Yeah,
that's actually fair.
The route to getting to a perfectly balanced game will make the game not fun almost every time. It's a very, very dangerous path to tread. So you have to accept some amount of imbalance, and a lot of that can become power creep over time, right?
Thanks, Robert, in the chat for saying not sucking is achievable. Don't make excuses. I think there is definitely a version of the game that can be considered.
Robert's right.
Also fun.
Yeah, like I think Robert basically nailed it in different words. Like, don't make an imbalanced game, but you don't have to make it perfectly balanced. Just don't make it imbalanced.
Right. And I think that's what their goal is, especially Games Workshop, is to not have a game that's so imbalanced that people complain about it constantly. Make a good enough game, not a great game. And
they've done a decent job, right? Like they've actually done a really decent job, and I think that it's important to note out from the very beginning. I don't think anyone here can say the game is worse than it was a year ago, for example.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I think the game is improved, and I think that really what we're trying to talk about is more like a preemptive thing rather than like just waiting for something to be worse. I think that
1 year ago, like April 2022.
Yeah,
I think the game was better in April 2022.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think
Yeah, before
you
the
know,
Thunderbolt volley change.
well,
Yep.
yeah.
Before season 1, before any seasons really. Right? There's an argument to be made.
There's argument to be made, but I think that the game hasn't just like regressed, right? Like I think we can all get to, you know, the game's not just getting worse or anything like that.
No, it's
not
just
not to rag on
yeah.
40K, but like, you know, like 9th edition definitely took a bit more of a nosedive. Books came out and were extremely, you know, meta warping.
We're gonna talk about
I think
that.
it's also
We're gonna
because of the
talk about that.
barrage of books. Yeah, like I think like we'll talk about it, but yeah, I think there has been a very just absolute barrage of books. We've had 2 books every month since January. It's insane.
Mhm.
Mhm.
That's fair.
Like it's at a point where I can't keep up with it. I'm pretty knowledgeable with it and within my community, and people usually come to me, and I just tell them just like I can't tell you anything about it at this point.
Yep, there's one of the reasons we started doing all the Battletome reviews the last couple of months is it's like an exercise to think through the armies and know how they play, so that we know how to play against them, and that we can you know have discussions about them. And that's been super helpful, by the way. If we hadn't done a lot of those reviews, I'd be so lost on stuff like Khorne right now. But it doesn't. It's
Murderlust does what now?
all right. So why is power creep bad? Well, as you can see with the illustration here, from the difference between the Necron's Codex at release and the Tyranids Codex at release, that's like a completely different game in terms of power, right? Like the Tyranids player could have been like 1,000 points, like could have had half an army and still beaten the Necron's player. That might be hyperbolic, but it certainly felt that way.
They could easily play 500 points down and
5
still
rounds.
handily beat a Necron.
Yeah.
army. Yeah.
It's crazy because like I actually started playing 40K right when the new codex for Necrons came out, and then now I'm playing AOS, so I get the full scene.
So I don't think we need to make a big case for why power creep is bad, but let's try to be as analytical as possible here. First off, riding the hype train is fun, but it doesn't last forever. And if you want that feeling to keep lasting, you have to keep buying new stuff. And that kind of constant flow of releasing new content, people get excited, they buy it, all the old stuff goes away, they buy new stuff, and so on and so on. That's going to lose a lot of people over time. So there's definitely like an economic argument to this that, like, yeah, you can keep some people around, but you're going to lose a lot of people. And I think when you have a model based on this kind of like, I'm going to get people excited, like temporarily excited, and then I'm going to keep repeating that temporary excitement over and over and over, I think something actually happens in a person's brain where they get burnt out on something and they never come back, like ever, right? Like, yeah, and that's worse than just like having a consistently good product that people can come back to anytime they want, right? People get burnt out with stuff all the time. People take breaks from games, they take breaks from hobbies, but they'll come back for the most part. But I think when you run off this short-term dopamine hit cycle, it's really hard to get those people to come back because they're out of the loop. They've fallen behind. They can't keep up. You know, all those feelings. Players invested in the previous content, and I mean like not just money investment, but like time and passion and any kind of interest that they have for it. They feel like the stuff they have is not viable anymore, and they feel stupid for getting it. And then this is especially bad in some games like Warhammer, which has a huge time and money investment, right? Something like a card game might cost a lot of money, but you don't put any time into the hobby. Like you might put time into building decks and playtesting them and things like that, but ultimately you buy it and that's it. You put it together, you play it, right?
There's a huge amount of time, love, and like passion and like discipline that goes into it, and then to, you know, have, if you're this kind of person who takes lots of time and effort on their armies, to have them suddenly be like, oh yeah, this is absolute garbage now.
Yeah, doesn't feel good.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most common questions you get from new players is what army is worth it to get, right? Because you see the barrier to entry and you're like, what's worth it?
Mm-hmm. Another question you hear all the time is what army is good right now? Like people know this exists. This is not like a mystery. What were you saying,
I
James?
feel like you could also make an argument between like you could have a power gamer and someone that actually wants to go in the hobby for a long period of time. Because you can see like a lot of burnout within like competitive play. Like people will go in for maybe like a month, maybe 2, and then they'll burnt out. But like a lot of the longer standing players that got in because of the actual models themselves will stick around a lot longer than those that won't.
Yeah. You generally find too, like if you stick with an army for long enough, you actually become more competitive with it than if you were to try to like jump around.
Yep.
But that's kind of a bit of a different discussion, I guess.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Customers will be unwilling to purchase a new product if they can reliably predict that it will become obsolete. You guys may have heard the term first book syndrome going around lately. This is because players have noticed a pattern where Games Workshop releases books at the start of an edition, which are the first books, and over the next 2 years before the next edition starts getting hyped up, that book has essentially become the worst army in the game. And they do their best by patching it with points and things like that, but there's no doubt that without significant overhauls, armies become bad and just stay bad because just wait till next edition, they'll get updated then, right? And that's that. If you can predict that's going to happen, and we were predicting it here on this channel all the way back when we did our review, we're like, oh man, we got good stats, this will probably hold up to power creep, right? Like we knew this was going to happen eventually. There's no way that it won't happen. Trust is difficult to earn and even more difficult to earn back. If players don't trust you as a company putting out rules, you're not going to suddenly win them over by having a fancy new edition where you hype things up. Like people just get burnt out. They're not coming back. Long-term gamers or games cannot power increase indefinitely. There's going to reach a point where things just start doing millions of damage. You're rolling hundreds of dice. Everything has +4 to saves and a 2-up ward and rerolls. And then there's abilities that ignore wards. And then there's abilities that ignore wards. Like, you can't do this forever, right? Eventually, you have to hard reset. And you can see that happening every 3 years in Warhammer games. Warhammer 40k
right now in real time.
Yep, Warhammer 40k is about to have a huge army or game-wide armor penetration reduction, which, that's a meme in itself. But
thank God.
Yeah, there's a lot
right.
to it.
People eventually want stuff to be scaled back because we want games to be technical. This honestly wouldn't be a problem if every army was updated all at once and then nothing changed for a whole edition, right? If every army got a codex, day one, bam, every army codex out the door, and then nothing changes for 3 years in terms of that, right? Then it would be fine. There'd be no power creep, and people wouldn't complain. You wouldn't want things to get scaled back. But because there is power creep over time with new books and new things like that, a scale back is necessary at the end of an edition. But there's a problem with that. Players hate feeling like they got weaker, right? Like if you played an army a certain way and you expected it to do a certain thing, any change to that sucks. Like the new Seraphon book is almost strictly weaker than the previous Seraphon book, right? Which is it's not a surprise. The previous Seraphon book was absolutely ridiculous. It was maybe the strongest book they've ever made in any game. And the 3rd edition book, no matter what you did, it was going to feel weaker. But players just don't like that. It sucks to feel weaker. Looking at a model that you used to love, like an Engine of the Gods, and now it's just completely useless. It sucks. It's not fun.
Yeah, it's definitely, and it's tough because you can't also, if you put out all codexes at the beginning of an edition and then don't change them, people will feel like the game's kind of static or stale.
Yep.
Even if it isn't necessarily that way, right? There's definitely a model where that could work, but obviously that's not something that would be something that Games Workshop could do right now. Games Workshop. Games Workshop could necessarily move to at the moment, right? They're doing the indexing for 40k. I think that would be just really difficult to do in AOS right now, for example. If they were going into the next year, how weird would that be to have all of our cool flavor and stuff distilled down into just 2 pages? Well, right? It's very difficult to do that.
Even the indexes, everyone knows they're temporary. Everyone knows there's going to be codexes that come afterwards that will scale up from that point. Everyone knows there will be power creep because none of the books are being done. The books are coming out sequentially, and whatever book comes out, usually the nearer to the new edition, that book's going to be more powerful than the book that comes out at the start of the edition, and that's just inevitable, right?
I mean, it's just inherent to their design process, right? Because
exactly.
If they have something, they're like, well, what new thing do we make?
And their design process is a result of their let's say marketing design, right? Mm-hmm. They work this way because they think it's going to generate the most amount of money for them. And there's nothing wrong with that. Making money's fine.
Yeah. We get good models because of it.
We do. Especially Age of Sigmar gets the best models. Oh man, do we get good stuff.
They honestly, one of the main reasons why I converted. Never looking back.
I will say the new Tyranids are nice. They look
they're awesome.
They look cleaner
so
though, right?
I don't like the boombox. I think that was a miss, but The other ones look cool. We'll see.
fair.
It's all horde stuff. Isn't that weird? Tyranids were never like a pure horde army. They were like a mix of horde and big bugs, but like the new starter box is
Depends.
all small bugs, which is weird.
I just see bugs, man. I just want to shoot it. I just want to flame it. Yes. Give it.
Space Marines have flamers. It's done well.
They have a full squad of flamers, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's true. The new unit. Yeah.
All right, so
But
why
yeah.
is power creep good? There's certainly reasons. For starters, riding the hype train is super fun, right? Like, it is fun to get excited about things and talk about, oh, look at how broken this is. Like, oh my god, can you believe they cost this unit at this thing? Oh, look at Murder Lust. It lets you get within 3 inches of an enemy. Look at all these prayers you can do. And Seraphon can teleport at the start of the hero phase. It's fun. It's just objectively fun. And there's really no argument against fun, right? Like, it's...
Yeah.
You can't quantify it. You can't measure it. You can't argue against it. It is fun. And although I said, a constant cycle of releasing new content will get rid of some players, it will keep some players as well, right? Like, some people really just live for that. Some people, buy a new army every 3 months. They pay somebody to paint it. They go play it for a few months, and then they put it on their shelf, and they do it all over again. And those people are big spenders. So it's not like this is a bad economic model. I don't know if it's the best, but it's still making money in some way. There's always something new to discuss. That makes it awesome for community building, right? You can always have different conversations. If they released every battle tome all at the start of an edition, a year later, who would be talking about the game? What is there to talk about? We have it.
Yeah.
Okay. Right?
Yeah. It's always cool to have your toys do something that no one else's toy can do, right? Like, that's the real gist of it, and it's tough to nail that in such a. It's not that the game is limited. Like, there's a lot of design space, but it's how do you make that feel special and make sure it feels special, I think, is the other thing, the other part of it.
Mm-hmm. And trying to avoid power creep will probably make the game weak and boring and not very fun. Like, going out of your way to completely make sure that everything is as balanced as possible all the time and nothing is too strong, you're going to end up making weak stuff that's not fun to use, right?
Yeah, like, if you just match the
moreover,
stats of... Oh, sorry, put it on.
Yeah, moreover, like, power creep is how they think about new and cool things to add that can further sort of get added in some ways to those older armies that did not have that design dimension. Like, like our Monsters Rampages are a good example of this. Now, they basically turned our mount traits into alternate rampages, and they released just full-on rampages for other armies. Well, who knows? Maybe a 4th edition book for Stormcast could just see, Thunderous, whatever, morale or whatever, as a proper Monsters Rampage for Stormcast monsters.
Yeah.
So,
for sure.
they don't know this until they develop things, try new things out, see whether it's good, see whether it's overpowered, and then they sort of reiterate on that again in a different way.
Yeah, our book definitely feels like the most 2nd edition book right now.
Yeah, it feels like they were trying new things out. They didn't go too far. And then this is the year, this is basically our 2nd year before the last year before the new edition, is where they're like, okay,
really
what new
exploring the
things can we
concept.
add onto these 3.0 mechanics that we basically have never tried in the first couple years?
They're also probably trying stuff out for 4th edition as well, seeing what feels good and using that data to drive their decisions.
Yeah, and it's interesting to take model types and give them different, like, similar point value model types, like heavy cavalry, right? You take a look at Skull Crushers. They don't really do too much damage, but they're super tanky, right? They're around that 200 point mark. Whereas you compare that to, like, Agrodon Lancers, who are much less tanky but do more damage, and then you compare that to something like Fulminators, who do all the damage in the world and are actually somewhat in the middle tanky, but they're obviously costed a bit more for that. And there's less wounds, like little different variations, and it's cool to see that for sure. Like, you want to have each army feel more unique. You don't want to just, oh, you pay the same exact points for this stat line every time, right? Like, each army gets its flavor from some stat lines being different, right? Like, some armies pay more of a premium for shooting than others, for example.
Yeah. Robert in the chat says change doesn't necessarily mean creep. Creep is specifically changing the event horizons and or outcome distributions. I agree with that, but sometimes that's a good thing, right? So, like, take a look at this next point I have here, and perfectly illustrated with these 2 books. Giving weak products or weak mechanics a second chance to be better is awesome, right? Like, Gloomspite Gitz went from the worst army in the game to maybe the best army in the game. Like, arguably, they're definitely top 3, right? They're one of those. And that's awesome because they have so many cool models. They have so many cool things that they do. And a big reason that they were bad wasn't because of their points or anything that you could just easily change. It was Like their mechanics weren't very good. They didn't have very interesting stuff. They didn't have very unique stuff. They were kind of a generic, slow melee army before. Now they've got all this cool stuff going on, right? And that is definitely power creep, but it's a good form of power creep, especially if you're a Gits player, or if you just appreciate having a more diverse metagame, right? Like it'd be boring if every army was so similar.
Yeah. The only thing that didn't get power crept in the book was the cover.
that got worse, right? That gross red banner at the top. Ugh, I don't know. I could do without that. So power creep has problems, but they're not unsolvable problems for the most part, or at least you can manage the extent of those problems, right? So you can buff older content in order to bring it to the same power as newer content. You see this all the time in digital card games. Hearthstone will release a new set, and it turns out, oh, well, some of these cards aren't as strong as we thought, so we're going to buff these cards that interact with them, and now the whole package looks a lot better. Warhammer does this through changing point costs. Like Necrons were bad, so okay, we're going to go through and overhaul their whole mechanic of like their, I don't know, whatever, the robot beep boop thing at the start of the turn.
Protocol.
Yeah, they went through and just revamped a whole bunch of rules, changed the points. Like these are, you can fix these things. There's, of course, problems with the fixes that are done in this particular medium, but it's not like power creep is like one and done and it's ruined forever, right? Like you can change things as you go along.
Yeah, it's tough to also make sure those fixes are in line as well. Because when you mentioned the Necrons, I mean, they had a time where the army didn't feel the best to play. They weren't like the strongest army. I think you can attest, Bragonco, they weren't like necessarily the strongest army, but you could still win because the tactics they gave them were so good. Like their version of battle tactic, their secondaries.
Yeah,
were
the
just so good.
secondaries was what was. Yeah, I mean they weren't good. They were sort of autocomplete, which honestly didn't feel too great either because there were against some players it was like, okay, I'm 40 points ahead of you round 2. There's no way you're winning this game.
But like the army isn't the strongest thing at all. Like you.
Yeah,
just...
yeah. The army was you basically were standing in a parking lot for 5 turns and scoring your objectives, auto take secondaries. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's tough to fix this kind of thing. I want to acknowledge that it's not like, oh, you just bump old books like some Nurgle units or some Stormcast units, just bump the points, or I guess bring down the points just to bring them.
Well, it's like,
bring
yeah,
the army up.
because
It's not just as simple
you're
as
seeing
that.
that with Flesh Eater Courts now, right? It's like they don't really get any mechanical buffs. It's just their stuff is so cheap they can finally start winning even if their book is a tad bit underpowered.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great if you play Flesh Eater Courts. You haven't received a 3rd edition update yet, but your army is not only relevant, but it's also very powerful right now. So that's proof that even though power creep exists, there are ways to mitigate it. So we've talked about what power creep is, why it happens for the most part, why it's bad, why it's good. And so I guess we can just have like an open discussion about power creep in 3rd edition. So this is the part where we get our salt shakers out. And no, so I've got like a short list.
But not for Stormcast.
I've got a short list of topics we can cover here, but we can just have like an open chat. Anything goes related to power creep in Age of Sigmar. So I guess we could start out just by pointing out that there's a big difference between the books they released this year and the books released last year. Even the books they released at the end of last year, like Ogres and Lumineth and Tzeentch, are still noticeably stronger than the books that came before that, right? But I'm gonna say it's not the biggest difference in the world. And there's been minimal point changes for the most part in 3rd edition. Like there's been little bits here and there, but like nothing has wildly changed like it has from a 2nd edition book into 3rd edition, right? Like the points costs are mostly the same for most units in the game. And I think a lot of that is like they're sticking pretty close to whatever template they set out at the start of the edition. You can make comparable units across armies, like Idoneth Reavers, 170 points, 20 shots, 3s, rend 1. Blissbarb Archers, 150 points, 20 shots, 3s, rend 1. Difference is Blissbarb Archers are a 6-up save, and Idoneth can protect their Reavers with the Tides and Forgotten Nightmares. So like, they're not wildly different from each other. Compare that to Marathi Bow Snakes, 180 points, 10 shots, right? So that's half the damage output, but they get to double tap every turn with Marathi. So, okay, cool. There's comparable units across armies. It's not like we're not so vastly different. It's not like 40k at all. Age of Sigmar is the difference in armies is a lot closer, I'd say.
Yeah, that's definitely what I was getting to earlier, is that there's there's units that are extremely similar in point costs, like you talked about, but they each have a little bit of flavor based on the faction. And I do like that about AOS so much, is that even though Blissarb archers are cheaper, for example, than Reavers have an upside of they're better recursion, they're like being in cover turn one, for example, having the 5-up ward from being around the boat, just different things. Obviously Slanesh has other options, like once they get enough depravity, they're -1 to hit. But that's the thing, is like they have other options. I like seeing armies have their own flavor of how they protect these things. If there's recursion, if there's not recursion, it's interesting.
You can see different
Um,
unit archetypes across armies, but each unit is kind of used differently, and the point costs
Mhm.
can be more or less justified by that.
Yeah, I mean it's asymmetric balancing, right? It's like
Yep.
you can either have the same scroll that does a different offensive or defensive thing differently, or you generally have a thing where I have a better scroll than you. You don't have a scroll that is good as mine, but your buffs can make you better than what mine is. So and we're costed accordingly. So then we play this like asymmetric sort of chess game.
Yeah.
Um,
Or you just have better prices on other types of units. Your wizards are
yeah,
better.
yeah,
They're better
your
cost.
chaff. Maybe you have access to cheaper chaff, or you have access to better pointed damage dealers than I do. Whereas all my stuff is damage dealing, so I'm pretty elite as it is.
Yeah,
So
Or you just
yeah,
have a unit that just sits at the back of the map and snipes things and 5s to wound. So they don't even have to
Oh.
hit you, they just do mortal wounds.
no, sure, yeah. What are you talking about?
Sentinels.
Sentinels.
Oh, Sentinel. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
I've got a point here: power creep versus faction identity. How much of what we're discussing is just this is what this faction's good at, so it makes sense for them to be costed in this way, versus how much of this is power creep. So, for example, Osiarch Bone Reapers have phenomenal rend, excellent defenses, powerful recursion. They've got the 5-up ward. They're basically like Night Haunt plus. Like that's how we discussed it in our review. But they're not strictly better than Night Haunt. They're just better at specific things. And is that an issue of, well, Night Haunt aren't good enough at different things, or is it our OBR now just supposed to replace Night Haunt? And I don't, I think there's a place for both of the armies. They just they got to work on Night Haunt a little bit more. Frankly, the point cost got to come down in that army, I think. OBR are super elite, super punchy, super sustainable, but it's not like they replace Night Haunt.
So yeah, there's therein lies the problem with power creep, because when you're dealing with asymmetric balancing like this, what happens is you often reiterate on something an army already does, but then do it even better. And that's when those older armies now need an adjustment. So I just talked about the asymmetric balancing of, I have these elite models, they do what they do really well, and then I have these weaker models and they need buffs to do really well. But year two, what starts to happen is I have these elite models that are just as elite as yours, but they're either as good or better than yours at a better points cost than yours. I can buff them to be even better than yours, and I can debuff you to be worse than me.
Yeah, that's basically.
That's a classic example of power creep. Like when you look at a 240 point stalker or a 240 point immortus. And a 200 point immortus guard. Compared that to like annihilators when they first came out, the shield annihilators that were 200. Like they were like the gold standard for like a 200 point, like 3 models, 3 wounds. But now you have 3 models at 5 wounds, 3-up save, ward save abilities, save stacking abilities,
right,
rend increasing abilities. And so that's where you're taking something and you've built on it.
Mm-hmm.
And
it gets squirrely.
Being more efficient.
It gets squirrely because should OBR be better at doing this than Stormcast? And I think you could make an argument that yes, because OBR don't have reserves, they don't have shooting, they don't have big monsters that they can run down the field. Like they have different tools. So maybe it's okay for a faction to come out to have even strictly better units than another faction because that faction's supposed to be better at that thing when it's worse at other things, right? So how much of this is faction identity and how much of this is power creep? I think I can point out some examples that feel definitely more like power creep, which is stuff like Caradron Thunderers are definitely power creep. There's no comparable unit in the game that does as much damage for that point cost from those ranges with that accuracy, while with that defense and a 4-up rally. For 135 points, they are criminally undercosted. And I'm not just here to complain about Caradron. I'm just using it as an example. It's like it's very obvious that this is.
I agree, because it's very hard to detect something like that in other books. But Caradron is a very straightforward book in a lot of ways, and so it's easy to look at it and be like, this unit is simply way too efficient. Now, we're not saying it should be exactly at adjudicator points or this points or this points, but it should be in that ballpark.
Mm-hmm.
Of 160 to 200. Now, it could
Yeah.
be 200, it could be 160, it could be 170, 165. I don't care. That's for the game designers to decide. But it belongs in that ballpark. It's like when I think in last edition, before this battle scroll, maybe actually in this edition, in the first couple of battle scrolls, the Chaos Sorcerer Lord used to just be a Lord Castellan, but with an arcane tome, like straight up.
Yeah.
In an army that had similar levels of armor to Stormcast, he was just straight up a Lord Castellan with arcane tome. He used to be 110 points. The Lord Castellan was a 155 point model. Now, you could argue that save stacking is much more of Stormcast identity, and so the Lord Castellan makes sense for the Lord Castellan to be 155. That's fine, but it means that he needs to be in the plus 20 minus 20 ballpark of him, not minus 40.
Yeah,
Right.
I totally agree. I think that's something that's definitely missing the ballpark, because obviously, like, KO is supposed to be the shooting army, right? They're
Mhm.
supposed to be somewhat the best at shooting,
Mhm.
and having to get up close and such. But it does seem like it's not even close as far as other types of shooting. It's KO should feel like they need to shoot as their main thing, but it's so far ahead and just so like destructive to everything that there's just no way for another army to keep up.
Yeah, the problem is they're not even paying in any of the defense. Like if you look at the triangle of fast, defensive, or offensive,
Or
they
even
are in
mobile,
all
yeah.
three triangles right now. Their
Yeah.
mobility literally doesn't matter. 4-inch move doesn't matter because you're going to be boating them or thunderhead bridging them. Sorry, what's it called? Soul Scream
Soul
bridging
Scream.
them.
Soul Screen bridging, yeah.
Yeah, they have 3-up saves, so they're effectively just Stormcast toughness. They have a 4-up rally, so they have the Fire Slayer rally, but they don't have the 5-up saves, and they have like really great shooting and
they're
rend stacking.
imagine if Vindictors had Skybolt bows. That's what Thunderers are.
Yeah. Yes.
It's better than that, actually.
Yeah, it is. It is
And
better.
for that matter, because again, KO is the best example of this. Look at the Admiral, right? Now, you can't compare it to any other hero because heroes just have wildly different roles, and some are like the linchpin of how that army works. Like, it makes sense for a one-cast wizard like the Chaos Sorcerer Lord to be 120, even though the heroic action is so excellent. He like makes that army work for a Slaves to Darkness army. You look at an Admiral, he hits like a level 1 Galmaraz, he generates a free CP, he basically makes that army run. He has that once per game rend stacking thing. He's 125. Our engine, the Lord Relictor, is 150. And that's where you start to see, okay, and the Lord Imperator is 170. And you're like, in what ways are these two units better for in the context of their armies so good that they need to be these many points versus the Admiral? And Admiral is, yeah, it's just he's so good that people are taking 2 of him in lists and still not suffering any like opportunity cost in taking other units.
Looking at a different army than even Stormcast, you look at Ideneth Yukin, and you look at the Soul Render, who's a core, for the Morphan style. I'm sure you can attest to that, James.
Yep.
He's not supposed to be anywhere near the same point cost as the Lord Admiral.
Yeah.
Like, he's not, a similar, damage output, save, and utility. Like, he has all 3 points at that same cost.
I want to also point out that comparing points across armies is obviously not a perfect metric.
No,
right? There's tons of flaws, but there's a different context for every single unit in every army. There's also, you have to consider allies. There's a lot of things, but like the reason we make these comparisons is because there's similar enough roles that you can fill in lists. Like Caradron Thunderers being 135 points, you see lists that have 30 of them and still a bunch of boats and a bunch of heroes, and it's like it's no surprise that those lists exist and also do really well. Because if you were to suddenly just reduce the cost of I don't know, Ideneth Reavers, if they were suddenly 130 points, you'd see the exact same thing happen. Everybody would just spam nothing but Reavers, and that would be the game. Yeah. So this isn't something specific to Caradron. We're picking on them just because they're really good right now and undercosted, and it's easy to pick on them. But this could happen with any army, right? Like you're even seeing with Blitzbarb Archers. We're looking at the world's lists right now, and there's people running 60, 70. I think the most is like 80 Blitzbarb Archers in some lists, right?
I think that was just Josh Bennett's list from.
There's 50. There's minimum of 44, a max of I think 66 that we're seeing.
Yeah, and then Seekers on top of that, right? To give them rent too. So like, people will just gravitate towards units that are just cost effective, right? So you have to be very careful, especially when you're costing shooting units, which just have an inherent advantage. Like Robert's saying here, shooting is mechanically flawed. I wouldn't go so far to say it's mechanically flawed, but like at the start of third edition, they costed shooting correctly.
Yes,
Stormcast shooting is extremely expensive. 200 points for 5 Skybolt Judicators. That's a fair price. Shooting has advantages that melee and screening units just do not have access to. It's way more reliable than magic, and it can also unleash hell, right? That's another consideration, is that you can just double your power during your opponent's turn. There's so many advantages that come with shooting that there needs to be a shooting unit tax. We can't have shooting units like Bliss Barbs, Reavers, Bow Snakes. These units can't be in the 130 to 150 range. They have to be closer to 200 points because it's just inherently better than melee combat. There's no risk.
That's exactly it. Like, going back to what you were saying earlier, Paul, if Reavers are any cheaper, I'm going to stop bringing my Thralls at the end of the day, and I'll just bombard people with my Reavers, drop a Lore Seeker, and get a Purple Sun on the table.
And you know what the best screen would be? Reavers.
More Reavers, yeah. Yeah, it's just cheap, it's efficient.
Well, that's the thing too. Like with the Reavers, they're going to screen and they'll get an Unleash Hell, and they'll Unleash Hell on a 2-up if they have a Leviathan near them.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's a little too easy to juice up shooting in the game for sure.
Yeah.
Shooting power creep is really obvious, and it's easy to point out because it really just does come down to like accuracy, range, and damage output, like ease of use, right? It's a lot harder to quantify power creep in other ways. And I have a general point here about mechanics creep, and I think we're mostly talking about this, but like before, if you wanted to shut off commands, you had limited options. You had like the Geminids of Ulgish, which cost points. They're a spell, they can fail. They have to do a mortal wound to you, which means it can't be negated, and it still needs to roll a 2-up. And it only shuts off commands until the combat phase. And then if you wanted to shut off commands in the combat phase, you needed to use a roar. That was pretty much the only way. Now, you can just shut off commands with spells. You can shut off commands by just moving within 3 inches. You can shut off commands in a variety of ways. And these are all way easier to use. Yeah, screech at people and it's gone. Like Terror Wings can just roll over your bravery in your own turn. In your shooting phase, they can scream at you. There's definitely been there's been a lot of mechanics power creep, right? Abilities are becoming more reliable, more frequent, more powerful. And that's, I think, a bigger issue than just stats, because stats you can fix. If Bliss Barb Archers are too cheap, make them cost more points. But stuff like disabling wards or reducing them, like the Bone-Tie Shrieker, or making it so models that have 1 or 2 wound count on objectives don't count towards contesting objectives. Gits being able to contest objectives from 9 inches away with huge amounts of bodies. Stuff like this is really hard to quantify in points. And that's what I'm a little more concerned about, is that this mechanics creep is pushing Stormcast and Ideneth and Nighthaunt and a few other of the older books just out of the game because they just can't keep up with the tricks.
Yeah, because like look at how we've seen recently a lot of like just turn off your wards mechanics. Like Bone-Tie Shriekers reduce your ward by 1. Soulbag Gravelords can just do a heroic action that's undeniable and just
on
go
a
and
Vampire Lord
with their on a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. It's just so if your army is costed around you having 5-up wards like Nighthaunt or Nurgle, what do you do?
Yeah, it's so awkward to see this game design philosophy where it's now turning into you don't get to play the game as much. Like reducing attacks, for example. Reducing attacks down to 1, which I found like that was like I think reducing attacks by 1 is probably more interesting, right? Like we see that like on our dragons, for example, the Karazai and Krondas. But when you just have a reduce all your attacks to 1, that impacts some units so much that it's like, why am I even playing this game?
There's also things like the Cockatrice where it's just like
that too.
You make that 4-up roll and it's like, okay, you're just
the game
I'm
just
not
changed
letting my opponent
completely.
play the game. Yeah, I'm just not. Now it's a great power creep change, but is it healthy? Is it healthy for a 105 point unit to just have an effect so powerful that it effectively just wins the game right there with how lethal AOS can be? I don't know, probably not.
Yeah, it makes melee feel even worse, honestly, lately. Getting in melee is just not great, and I think it brings up Robert's point. You bring up how double tapping long strikes wiping things. Bliss Barb Archers right now do the same damage or do double the damage of long strikes. So basically, they get to Thunderbolt volley long strikes every turn.
Yeah,
like as long as you land the Bliss Barb Seekers, shooting target first for Ren 2.
Yeah,
they actually
Bliss
do
Barb
the same
Archers
damage.
have the same range as long
Or
strikes.
30 block.
They have effective 30.
Yeah, effective 30.
Range. And
it's 400.
What?
Yeah,
110 shots to the face, threes and threes.
it's like 140 out of the no, it's out of the 30 block. I was doing the math earlier because we were talking about it. The 33 block is the homunculus. The 30 shooting of units is 450 points native battle line with 30-inch effective range and does the same damage as double tapping long strikes, but they get to do it every single turn. So there's, I'm not saying that Thunderbolt Volley should be unnerfed because honestly, it's better that it is, right? Like I think that shooting should just be toned down in the game. The Thunderbolt Volley was honestly negatively impacting the internal balance of the Stormcast book. But overall, all these things have just grown so much where Thunderbolt Volley actually is
Pretty
yeah, I mean,
tame.
yeah, there's the
compared-
teleport too, but either way, you're still a 30-inch range is so large that you're gonna get hit, right? Like it's not something
Yeah,
you can just avoid,
the
and it's
thing is,
every
they're
single
triple
turn.
issuing commands. Yeah,
Yeah,
30
and they're
inch range
triple
is gonna
issuing
be every.
commands.
You can't hide. Like, if you
Mhm.
want to play on objectives, this is an objective-based game. You are not hiding from Blizzard archers. Like, they will put like 88 shots into
Yeah.
you if they
Yep.
want to.
The fact
And that's
that
not to say they're just broken, but it's a similar level of power that
Yeah.
doesn't get brought up because it's not like hero phase shooting. Like we have this like idea that you're doing an out of phase action. It doesn't really matter too much that it's an out of phase action. In the end, the result that's happening from that is what matters.
well, the turn order does matter as well, but
Well,
the
it
bigger
does,
thing
but-
is just doubling the damage output, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, Bliss Barbs are doing too much damage for their point cost. But it's a weird situation because if you were a Slanesh player, would you be stoked to find out that from second edition and from first edition, your fast glass cannon, wheels of fire army is now the best shooting army in the game? Well, second best after Caradron. So let's say suddenly you get a new book, and all of a sudden all your army does now is shoot, and they do it exceptionally well, and it's nothing like what your army used to do, and nobody likes playing against it.
I know Vince isn't happy, and he's a Slanesh player. Vince Venturella has stated how he's not happy about this.
Yeah, and
it's
totally agree. Like if Bliss Barbs went up to, I'm going to put an extreme number here, but let's say 180, right? Because I feel like with the amount of shots they can put out, all at 2s and 3s with bonus rend from Bliss Barb Seekers, they're a little bit better than Idoneth Reavers, and Idoneth Reavers are 170, and there's different contexts for different armies, but I think let's just say 180, right? Increase Bliss Barbs to 180, make some of the melee units a little bit cheaper, right? Like Slamgors, Fiends,
Fiends.
Emberesh,
Hellstriders,
Myrmidesh.
maybe the Painbringers and Twin Souls. Yeah, those can get all a little bit cheaper. I think that's just better for Slanesh players. They're going to have more fun using more units, and it's more fun for everybody else that doesn't have to sit there and take 110 shots from Bliss Barb archers.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the most. This is the thing that upsets me the most because this honestly just feels like an insult. Blaze of Glory versus Murder Rolls and versus Crematorium OBR. Blaze of Glory. Blaze of Glory is a terrible, terrible ability that you could forget existed and win your games pretty much exactly the same, right? Like it's, and that was fine. Honestly, if every book had abilities like this that were so minor but flavorful and you had to keep in mind, I thought this was going to be the standard for third edition, and I was actually pretty excited because I'm like, okay, cool. Stuff like this is not going to be too powerful. It's going to be just fine. It's going to be flavorful. But instead, they've power crept the hell out of this mechanic. Instead of having to be within 1 inch of an enemy model, you can now be, if you're a zombie, literally any distance away. It usually happens on a 5-up, and if it doesn't happen on a 5-up, it happens on multiple dice rolls. Murder rolls are potentially 3 dice per Blood Warrior, all on 5s, doing mortal wounds to anything within 3 inches. Crematorium is based on your wound characteristic, like Blaze of Glory, so if you lose a Stalker, that's 5 dice, and each 5-up is a mortal wound. But more likely you're going to be using Mortek Guard with that, which is, you lose Mortek Guard on a 4-up, they come back, and then on a 5-up, they explode and do a mortal wound to your enemy. Right? So, like, all of these compared to Blaze of Glory is so bad that it feels like an insult. That, like Nagash is sitting there scheming, like, how do I really just stick it to Sigmar and his golden boys, right? Like, I'm going to make my own Stormcast with blackjack and hookers.
Yeah, I think the next point though really like kind of hits even harder is like why have an ability like Blaze of Glory, right? Like these abilities kind of just interrupt the game, and they don't have that much impact. If you're gonna have something as weak as Blaze of Glory, all it's doing is slowing things down. And I think probably the biggest rules bloat as far as like an ability that just seems to interrupt and doesn't have too much meaning is probably the Slanesh temptation mechanic. I don't think it has enough I don't know, like game presence. Like once you get past the idea that I can just take the D3 mortals, all it just feels like is like hit 6 mortals coming out of a unit.
There is a little bit of play with it, right? If they start shooting stuff like support heroes and it happens to be the amount of damage that would be necessary to kill the hero, they might
But
offer you
You're
depravity.
niche. Like you're in a small situation, right? It's like Blaze of Glory. Oh, I just needed 1 wound to kill that one guy or 2 wounds, right?
Well, in,
like,
in that case, you get D6 depravity, which is even better than killing that guy, frankly.
Well, yeah, it can be, and it's just it interrupts the flow of the game, and I think that's kind of one of the
Sure.
things that's bloaty about it is that we're just kind of adding on to the game for the sake of adding on.
Oh, there's way worse culprits, right? Like Blaze of Glory is a
that's
much
just
bigger
one of them.
culprit. No, Blaze of Glory
Yeah,
is like
Blaze of Glory. My problem with Blaze of Glory is like if Stormcast is like the starter book in the starter edition, it's a needlessly wordy ability that requires very exact bookkeeping and very exact differentiation between models because people misplayed that all the time.
Oh,
I saw
yeah.
people doing, oh, I have a Thunderstrike model, my mortal wounds happen on a 5-up. It wasn't
No.
one
It
to the
wasn't even
dice
that.
roll, it was one to the dice.
They don't even happen
So,
instantly, which I see
why
all the
why
time
do
too.
that? You know, why do that? Why subject players to this? Just give them murder roll, man. Just simplify it. I don't know why they whatever.
It's the worst combination of unnecessarily complex, time consuming, bookkeeping, and weak. Like
Yep.
Yep.
It just takes up time. Like honestly, I could forget it, and I sometimes do. I'll be honest, I sometimes do. On like if my vanquishers are dying, like the one dies, I won't even bother.
Yeah, Alex point in the chat points out Blaze of Glory also has horrific disjointed timing between rolling and the damage done. Yes, that's another problem is that the damage happens at the end of the phase, which everybody forgets about, but that can actually matter. And the fact that you have to keep track of that nonsense is
It's just a lot of weird
silly.
like bloaty things for sure.
That stuff to me feels more like power creep, right? It's the points are a different issue, right? Like they can rein those in. I'm much more concerned about the mechanics creep. And Robert in the chat mentioned the -1 attack and -1 hit is a big mechanical impact. Yes, though that stuff sucks to play against, right? Everybody's getting cool tricks, and if you're not playing one of the more recent books, you don't get cool tricks. You don't get -1 hit. You don't get -1 wound. You don't get set the attack's characteristic to 1. You don't get stuff like that. And if you don't have stuff like that, I don't know how much longer you're going to be competitive if they don't change
There's
the points soon.
Yeah. There's not a lot of counterplay to that too. Like how do you counterplay set to 1 attack when
Set to
it's
one
just
attack.
an ability that happens?
Yeah, anything that's reducing your force multipliers at the end of the day sucks. I don't think -1 to hit is too bad because you can easily counter that with an all attack. But -1 to
Counterplay.
wound, yeah, -1 to wound is where it really starts to screw you up.
Mm-hmm. And let's say you're playing one of the armies that does multi-damage attacks, and you're playing against Coalesced or Petrifex, and they have -1 damage taken. It's like, well, I can't increase my damage, so there's nothing I can do here, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Counterplay is what starts to matter, and some of that, like because we had that with Nighthaunt, and what we could do was tech by building into more 1 damage effects, which is a little bit of an interesting decision. I do like having a little bit of counterplay there. But there's just some effects that you just really can't get past, right? Like especially if you have something like a -1 to hit, -1 to wound happening at the same time, reducing attacks, something like the Cockatrice where you're only hitting on 6s. These kinds of things you can't really play around that well, right? It's something that, and especially with something like the Cockatrice where it's so random, it's half the time you don't get to play the game. And I think that's kind of what really feels bad is how do you play the game when you don't get to roll like all of your dice? You've got your bunch of attacks from your Fire Slayers model. Suddenly they're cut in half, and you're only rolling 1 dice per each model.
I mean, they should limit the range of these things, is my opinion. Like, that's the thing, right? It's like, how reliable is it? How powerful is it? How's it at scale? The problem is Cockatrice scales really well because it's 6. It's not a shooting attack, because if it was like a, D6 shots, 3s and 4s, -1/1, and if you get damaged, you take it. Sure, I'll be like, cool, whatever.
Yeah,
if
you
it was
can try
like,
to save it.
yeah, or if it was just like, oh, in your shooting phase, so you can only do it on your turn or on an Unleash Hell, so you can't really take 2 or 3 Cockatrices. If you manage to hit and then wound, then whatever. If you manage to hit, it goes off on a 4-up. But the range for something like an ability that powerful should probably be 3 inches and not 6 inches, Because 3, it's like, okay, you're sort of making your opponent funneling into certain positions when they charge you. But 6 is just like, oh, I can just cover like the entire objective if I'm standing on it.
Yeah.
They did a really good job at avoiding power creep for the first year and a half of third edition, right? From 2021 in the summer all the way up until I'd say the first real big hit of it. It wasn't even Lumineth because like
No.
you could argue it was Lumineth before they nerfed Helon. That was insane. the version of Helon written in the book is absolutely absurd. But after they nerfed that, because they caught that quickly, I'd say the first real power group we saw was Ogres.
Yeah, the ogre shooting was like it's Rend suddenly started not to, and we hadn't talked about Rend yet. Rend
Yeah.
suddenly became. I don't know why Rend 0 doesn't exist more in the game, right? Like you're not using Rend 0 anymore. Honestly, we're almost getting up to Rend 2 being a standard. It's getting kind of crazy. Rend 1 is definitely a standard right now. Like your basic unit has Rend 1 now.
Rend 1 means I'm going to force you to use all-out defense. Rend 2 means I'm going to avoid hitting your Mystic Shield target. And Rend 3 is just the standard now. I don't know. So,
I don't know if it's that far yet, but
just wait till
It's
people start
getting up
teching
there.
invaders. It's going to be so degenerate. They're going to nerf Blitzbarb spam, and then people are going to go invaders and hit you with like a billion Demonette attacks at Rend 4.
that's probably a little bit easier to deal with because you still got to have the heroes around. Key to victory going away will help a lot with that. There's definitely a little bit more counterplay against that. I don't think actually that's one of the more toxic mechanics, honestly, which is kind of surprising, right? Like you'd think, oh, like a -6 to save or something is crazy because it's kind of similar to the like the Night Haunt reducing your saves thing, right? They have to charge a bunch of things. There's
There's counterplay.
there's counterplay.
Well, also like,
and that's what's
yeah,
important.
but like,
Is counterplay.
but yeah, I think Iron Blasters are a good example of like power creep because
You just
it
get
was
to
a
be
unit
Rend
that could
3
shoot 30
all the time.
Yeah, you just get to be Rend 3. It's a unit that shoots effective, I think, 38 inches
39.
on the long range weapon and 21 inches on the short range weapon. The 21
And it
inches is effectively
doesn't degrade.
having 5 Vanguard Raptors. It's like 3s and 2s, 3s and 3s, -2, -2, 2 damage, and then long range is like 2 shots, 4s and 2s, -3, D3 plus 3 damage.
Yeah, D3 plus 3.
Yeah, it
when
was
you look at that, when you look at something like that and you're like, okay, if shooting is supposed to be a premium, how is this below a Skybolt Judicator? How is this below? Because remember that thing was 180. It's like how do you look at a Knight Judicator and how do you look at this thing and you go, okay, these things are the same. They do the same role, long range artillery fire support. And it's like, how did you even think this is going to work out okay? And the weird thing is like, when they point models, they don't think about how the efficiency drops. I think Nighthaunt is okay with -1 damage because they're 1 wound models who lose board space and who lose attack potential when they drop down in points. Sorry, in models. If you take a unit of 20 blade guys to 10, that is less damage coming at you. That's less models occupying the board. If I have, the same -1 damage on like something as big as I don't know, like 6 Immortus Guard, 10 damage means nothing to them.
Yeah.
Like, so same with like shooting units. Like the Iron Blaster does not care if you do 8 damage to it. You need 9 wounds to kill it. Exactly.
Yeah. On the topic of Rend, like Nighthaunt were super scary. Like everybody was losing their minds when they first came out. Like, oh my god, they can get up to -4 to Rend. They can just obliterate you. But especially. Definitely simply because we put out that how to counter Nighthaunt video, obviously. But no, like people learned to play against it. They learned all the limitations of it. They learned, well, it can only be the unit that's within an inch. They don't do any damage before they charge. So you basically just whatever you scream, that's what they hit and that's what they kill. There's ways to counter all the cool mechanics and fun, flavorful stuff they were putting in. Like Ideneth Tides got better from second edition. But overall, Ideneth has ended up a worse army simply because everybody has cooler tricks than Ideneth now.
Ideneth is just Rend 1.
Yeah.
I'll also be honest, like, how much of this do you think is armies being held back because Magic is so utterly busted in the meta? Like, 2 of the biggest counters for both Ideneth and Nighthaunt are Lumineth and Tzeentch.
Better Magic.
Yep, just Tzeentch can just stall them for days, creating chaos spawns in their ranks, making sure Nighthaunt don't go anywhere, and then Lumineth just has so much 1 damage shooting that Nighthaunt can't keep up with.
And Seraphon's just gonna negate those armies. Like they just don't exist anymore now that Seraphon's
I feel like when we talk about gatekeepers and we always talked about like Gargants and like Saves to Darkness and OBR, I think the Magic armies, the 2 top Magic armies, Lumineth and Tzeentch right now, Seraphon will come later, I'm sure of it, but right now, I think those two really like suppress a lot of things from seeing play.
They
or,
do.
being good.
Magic is like, it always creeps up in an edition, right? We've seen this
Yep.
three editions in a row now. Magic just keeps getting more and more powerful because they always release like low magic armies at the start, and then they ramp it up so that the cool magic armies feel like cool magic armies. Like the fact that we've got a 4-spell wizard that just, he doesn't even roll dice, he just casts it on a 10+, it's like,
And
that
it's
is-
less points than Nagash.
that's like some Magic the Gathering level bullshit.
Yeah.
You know, like it's so stupid that that's a mechanic in the game. Or Nagash, who he casts 8 spells a turn and he's not keeping up with the Magic meta. That's how dumb it is. He +3 to cast 8 spells a turn and somehow not a viable spellcasting domination list. Okay.
Nope.
It's Magic is dumb.
Thing.
And I say that as a Seraphon player. Magic is straight up stupid in this game. They really need to make it more consistent, with better counterplay, but also lower the max potential output, especially from just spell mortal wounds in general. Like, they really got to rein that stuff in. A lot of this D6 stuff needs to go down to D3. A lot of the D3 needs to go down to just 1. All these spells that are like, roll a dice for each model on a 3+ or something, you get mortal wounds. Like, this stuff is way too good. And frankly, this stuff being so good makes the rest of those armies worse. Like, if Lumineth didn't have these ridiculously powerful spells and wizards, like, that's their faction flavor, I get that. But if you took some of the power out of their magic, you could put it into some of the stuff that's not doing so well, like Stone Guard, Blade Lords, Dawn Riders, Ballistas, these units that are underpowered. You could make a case that, well, we'll nerf the magic, but we'll buff these units up.
Yeah.
I think
those
magic
units are not that bad. It's just that the other build is just so much better.
Yeah.
Yep.
Magic is fun for both players when both players are casting, like, honestly, it's not even the number of spells that matters. It's the consistency and the counterplay. Because if you
Counterplay.
have a player casting 10 spells a turn, but if the other player has like 3 unbinds and they have a reasonably good chance to unbind those spells, they're still fun to be had there. But you get some situations where it's like, okay, I'm casting 15 spells a turn and you've got 1 unbind, and also I killed the hero that has an unbind with a spell, so that's it. I'm just going to do the rest of my hero phase.
You're gonna have to use up your
And
hero
that
action
also-
now. to
That
unbind.
also happens to be the hero that brings back every model in your
Yeah.
army.
I also have +2 to +4 to cast and a reroll in every single one of these, so like Magic just needs a complete overhaul in 4th edition. We have had the same casting system since 1st edition. They have patched it with band-aids over and over and over, and every time at the end of an edition becomes the same oppressive nonsense. We really need a revamp of it in 4th edition. It's
I think
it's time.
Yeah, it's underappreciated how much like Arcane Tome was
Looking
big,
at
right?
40k, I'm hopeful. They
Yeah.
basically realize the same thing, that for a lot of armies, it's just sitting there removing models while your opponent rolls 2d6 and does whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
In-app stuff.
And how do you
Yeah.
create a system where some armies have some access to magic and others don't? That's what the Arcane Tome and Heroic Willpower are supposed to do, is give armies that don't have magic access to magic. But they just, like, Heroic Willpower sucks. Naked Unbinding is not very useful. And Arcane Tome has just been nerfed into oblivion.
I think that's part of the reason also why Arcane Tome was so strong. It wasn't just like, oh, you take it, you get to, you get Flaming Weapon, you get a faction spell that you didn't want to pay a wizard for. It was also like, how am I going to interact with these magic armies if I don't take Arcane Tome Master Magic?
Yeah.
How?
And
you don't get to interact.
They really got rid of that at the worst possible time, because now
Yeah.
the next year of the game until we get a new edition is just going to be magic. It's going to be defined by magic. Seraphon, Lumineth, and
I think
Zeech.
All these books
they
that
don't
come
do
out.
this enough, and they really should. Like, maybe this is like a core design philosophy of theirs, but if their core design philosophy of AOS is shooting comes at a premium, I think their response should also be magic comes at a premium.
Yeah.
Because against some armies, you will get to interact in a way, like if you're like a Lumineth fighting Zeech, whatever, it's a game, But
Mhm.
if a Lumineth fighting an Iron Jaws player, like the Iron Jaws just say, okay, yeah, just take 20 minutes, do your thing.
Yeah, talk about that one.
Do your thing.
Yeah, Anthony, there's a chat comment here. Ironjaw's big party trick was going up to Ren 3 once per game. Now that doesn't even matter. What are your thoughts
You're
as
right,
an
Alex.
Ironjaw's player?
Honestly, so the way that I put it is essentially, if you're facing a Lumineth player that understands the fundamental portions of screening and he can screen out pieces, then he's going to win. Because Ironjaws does one thing and it does one thing only. It charges you. And even with the recent debuff to was the Arcane Tome, it's like the Arcane Tome was actually a massive debuff to Ironjaws because it allowed us to conceptualize and condense our lists to allow the jump, because the jump was the main key feature of our maneuverability. It's we can attack you from any table quarter on the map as long as we have that one wizard there, which was often the case the Maw Crusher. And now with that removed, it's like, okay, now I only need to just screen the front, put a bunch of sentinels in the back, and then you're laughing. I can only move 18 inches. My Maw Crusher, if I throw him into you, I lose. Because that's my general, and he keeps my CP efficient.
Yeah,
so,
that's pretty much what we said in our How to Counter Ironjaws video. Was like, this army is countered by basic screening tactics, like 90% of the time. And that's not good. Like, it was fine at the start of 3rd edition, right? Because there was still enough variety with like how much power you had with all those triple commands and the roars and all that stuff. But that gimmick has not aged well with the power creep we've seen.
Yeah, absolutely not. Like, I honestly, I was making jokes with the local community that we have here. It's like, I played more games against Lumineth in the past 6 months than your average Lumineth player would play in a month. Like, it's gotten extreme. It's, yeah. I really hope that they tone down the shooting. I want to see more brawl. That's what I want to see. At least with the way that things are going.
I think shooting is just like a points issue. Like with Magic is like a mechanical power creep issue. Like if Bliss bars went up 20 tomorrow, all the shooting units went up, Thunderers went up. You're still fine. You can count for that efficiency and what they can do to you. But Magic is like what do you do? Like okay.
Okay. So let's put it this way. So can we counter shooting units in traditional sense? It's like I have to hit you and I have to wound you, while also counteracting the fact that like I don't even care if I hit you. I just want my 5s and 6s, and I just want to do mortal wounds to you. Because at that point, it's also adding on different mechanics.
So I mean, right? The thing is like that's a different problem altogether. I think that's a fundamental internal balance problem in the Lumineth Tome, is that Sentinels get access to the Helon trait. They should. They should be like a Stormdrake level errata that they need to do, where Helon can only benefit the Kangaroo dudes and the Fox, not the Sentinels. Because the entire reason for them changing the Sentinel War Scroll was because they had 2 shots at 18 inches last edition. It was the most busted thing ever. And so they knowingly put it down to 1 shot. And then they're like, oh yeah, here, have this. That just undoes the nerf that we just did to you. So that's the problem in that book. I think without it, Sentinels are fine because their damage is not that good. They're not a high damage unit. They're a very accurate unit.
Yeah. Maybe I'm coming at it from a perspective of just, I guess, maybe a little bit of prejudice. I've played the pointy ears too often, man. And I'm just getting PTSD at this point.
There's an entire Lumineth hate. There's a Lumineth hate channel in my local Discord where I play Age of Sigmar. So yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Nobody likes them.
Cole McCarthy asks, where does this power creep put Stormcast in the tier ranking now? How many armies do we just not stand a chance against a good general running them?
I think we're B tier. I think about half the armies we have a good, like, basically think of like anything that came last year, we have a decent chance of beating.
Well, let's make a tier list quick. I love finishing off our streams with that.
Quick? It's never quick.
It's gonna be quick. There's not a lot of debate this time around.
It's not a lot to do. Just pull up our last one.
Pull
up the last one and just end it.
Oh, it's too late. I already started moving stuff around.
No, pull up the last one. We're not spending 3 hours on this.
No, it won't be 3 hours. It'll be fine.
It was 3 hours last time.
It won't be.
3 hours of just the tier list, was it? Alright,
here we go. Quick. Alright, top 4 armies. Caradron, Tzeentch, or not Tzeentch. Caradron, Gitz, Lumineth, Khorne. Right? Those are S tier.
Lumineth is probably like on the tipping edge.
No, Lumineth is S. Lumineth is still S.
For sure it's S. Okay.
Alright.
Sure. A tier. I'm going to get rid of these upper lower nonsense. That's going to get rid of a lot of debating, I think. So we'll just have B tier, C tier,
let's bring it down.
Simple. Okay? Cool. A tier, Fire Slayers. Easy, right?
Yep, A tier Fire Slayers. Okay. That's easy.
Ogres
might change though with the way that the new tomes are, but for
sure.
Now.
I think it's still an A tier. Ogres, I think, are still A tier, right? Still good.
Ogres still A tier.
Okay, great. Sylvaneth, A tier.
Yep, Sylvaneth definitely A tier.
Cool. Slaanesh, A tier.
Yep.
Cool. OBR, the new book. We've got a review coming out soon. I think they're an A tier army.
Yeah,
I think they're low A tier. They'll
they're
please
low,
keep
but
the
Yeah,
card B.
I would say
we'll
low
just
A
keep
tier.
going.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
just A tier. Just throw it in
They
there.
counter enough of the stuff going on in the meta to be A tier.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Seraphon A tier as well.
I don't know,
Yeah,
but
it's close,
I'll
but yeah.
take your word for it. Gavin
I-
thinks they're A tier, so
I
I'll
think
take
so.
his word on it.
I think so.
Okay.
Anything else sticking out that should go into A tier? Maybe Soul Blight. I really hate the fact that I would call them A tier,
hate
but
Soul Blight being.
I
yeah.
can't
Legion
deny
of
it.
Blood could be low A. Like they're the
I don't know if
few
you're actually
ones.
playing the game at that point for them to be A tier. If you're playing it that way to win.
let's say it's Legion of Night with 80 direwolves and a teleporting jaws at
Nothing.
+2 cast.
Yeah, A tier.
That I hate that it's A tier, but I think it is.
Yeah, I hate that it's A tier, but it is.
Yeah. Zinch, I think, is also A tier. I think they're finally being bullied out.
Yeah.
I think
No.
the Khorne and Karajan matchups are pretty bad for them.
No.
You don't think so?
No.
Okay, still S.
I don't know. I think Zinch is A tier finally. I think they've dropped off just enough. Like they were never super popular in the first place, but I think they've dropped off enough that they're A tier.
High
They still
production
have
quality
this
on the stream.
Transpine nonsense.
Yeah, I know.
They can
Super.
do
All right, whatever.
super high.
Put top of A.
The
Some
thing is,
nonsense.
they can do the Transpine nonsense in a way not a lot of armies can.
Yeah,
that
Paul,
keeps
can
them
you
good.
extend so we can see the S tier?
I did it. It's
Yeah.
good. It's
Oh.
super high production quality stream, guys.
Okay, let's go.
Okay,
Sure.
we'll put Zinch at the top of A tier. I don't want to spend time arguing. Slaves, I think slaves are a B tier army, but
Yeah,
Yeah,
slaves are
those are
B.
B tier army.
but people are starting to get Splintered Fangs now, and I think the Splintered Fang build is A tier.
Yeah, guys, those of you watching, this is a stock issue. If people ever get access to 60 Splinter Fang, slaves can jump into A tier pretty well.
Yeah.
This is held back by GW stock.
So I'm gonna put that in A tier because that's where they are. If you have enough Splintered Fang,
It's a conditional A.
let's see. Nothing else strikes me as A tier on
Nope.
the remainder. All right.
Nope.
What are the worst armies in the game right now? I'd say
Badmouth.
Ideneth,
Ideneth.
Nighthaunt.
Idnet, Nighthaunt, Nurgle, I think is pretty bad right now.
Is it as bad as those two though?
Okay. And Nurgle's
yeah.
like B.
I think the
No,
ward
no, dude.
disabling is
Nur-
really big.
Nurgle is B
Okay,
because I
that's
feel like I'm thinking of like how Ironjaws and Stormcast would fight it. What does Nurgle do to like Soulblight Gravelords? What does
Or
Nurgle do to
OBR.
OBR when they cast a
Oh
Bone
yeah,
Type
Soul Blight.
Or
I mean,
Caradron
Nurgle
with a
has
grenade.
decent
Yeah.
volume, but not like still not enough.
Yeah.
I'm willing to agree that Nurgle gets knocked down to C tier.
Okay,
Yeah,
fair.
Nurgle
Okay.
is bad.
I actually feel bad for them. I actually want them to be better. They
Yeah,
need
me
it.
too. Like, don't get me wrong, I hated the Puscoil spam they had, but there's too many ward turn-off abilities going on right now in the game.
Yeah, like the most meta list right now, or is like I don't even know if the bug spam list is even
Yeah,
a
do
thing
you go-
anymore. It's just
you sh-
nurglings.
You shoot
You got Blight
diseases and you
Kings
Nurgle.
And yeah,
Nurgling.
you use the warband.
It's not great.
Rotmire.
Or the Rotmire
Yeah,
Creed,
Rotmire
yeah.
thing. Yeah, Rotmire and Blight Kings is decent. It actually is.
I think Gargants are C as well. They might be a 3-2 army, but that's C tier. That's
I think
We'll call
Gargants is B, actually.
You think so?
Yeah, some
'Cause I'm-
matches they just win, man. They
So
just
I'm gonna
like
put-
they're like they feel like the ultimate expression of Timmy, where they'll just win because their mechanics either spike really low or really high. That's how.
I don't know. I
that's
think
how
it's C tier just in the sense that it doesn't compete like the
It
mechanics
doesn't
don't
win
compete.
tournaments. It's not like the most competitive
Yeah, but-
list. It can just
Yeah, but
win
it's a
some games.
solid- Yeah, but it's a 3-2 army. I think that's a B tier. Like, I think
Yeah.
it very rarely
that's
goes
fair.
3-2. It gets shut
Yeah.
off by magic. Like, you face a magic army that debuffs you, you're dead. Like, but
That's going to be more common going forward. Soul Blight,
Yeah, it's
Seraphon.
gonna- yeah, there we go. That's it.
Okay. Cities are B. I think cities are way better than people think right now. Especially that
Yeah,
new
but
Storm Coven.
nobody wants to invest that, so I don't need to be afraid of it.
Uh,
Nobody's buying it or me.
I wish I gotta find a tier list that has separate things for Cruel Boys. Cruel Boys, I think, are the worst army in the game. They're D.
Yep.
Big Wa is A. Iron Jaws is B. Bone Splitters
I-
doesn't exist. Nobody plays.
I
Bone Splitters.
appreciate you
Bone
putting
Splitters.
Iron Jaws at B.
Oh, they're still
I
B, man.
appreciate
They
it.
roll over
No, they're
some
B.
armies.
Yeah. No, they are. If yeah, they're better than Gargants at doing that job of just rolling over
Yeah.
things.
Okay, you know what? That's fair.
Yeah.
That's
So Stormcast in particular, since that's the question that caused this, I think what's hurting us, and I was a very big proponent of keeping Stormcast in A tier in our last stream, if you guys recall, I was fervently defending our position there. But the new books are really a step above in terms of mechanics. They have some really powerful tools, and it's not to say we're not competitive. We can still 4-1, 5-0. We've got great units. We've got great tools. The problem is that these matchups get a lot harder. And we have to start leaning into some units more so than others, right? So stuff like the 10-foot evocators, I don't think that's going to see play anymore. I don't think that's efficient enough. Grand hammers are out, like annihilators with grand hammers. That playstyle's out.
Not efficient. Yeah, not efficient
That's
enough.
not good.
We're pretty much going down to like
You have
some-
no idea how much
some-
it hurts me to say that, by the way.
I
I
know.
love those units.
some kind of like shooting castle using either storm drakes or fulminators, or like some melee hammer and then shooting, like some combination, like a typical stormcast list. That's still viable, I think. You've got Karazai builds; those are actually creeping up. Those are looking better and better. The more I play Karazai, the more I like him. Shootcast is going to be viable. Like, just if everybody else is spamming shooting, why not us too? We get a Torlon, everything's a +1 hit. It'll work.
Comet Fall.
Comet Fall is stupid but viable. Yep.
Very viable, but yeah.
They really
I mean,
got
it's
to
so
errata that.
Marathon is taking it now.
It's so
Yeah.
good. Sylvaneth and other armies are taking it. Yep. It's dumb. It really needs a nerf so you can only use one meteor banner per turn. I really hope they implement that, because it's not good for the game for every order army to have access to this 360 point package of 3d3 mortal wounds, and it's too disruptive. But yeah, like, we've got tools to beat all the A tier armies. We've got tools to beat all the S tier armies. It just requires very careful play, and our stats are very good. Stormcast have still the best stat ratio in the game. Like, Fulminators do amazing damage, Storm Drakes do amazing damage, we do great damage. The problem comes when you low roll. When you roll low, you don't have backup plans in Stormcast because everything's so expensive. If you like whiff on 6 long strikes in a turn, that could cost you the game, right? If you hit averages more or less all the time, Stormcast are still a great army. It's when the low rolls happen that just cost you games, because we don't have backup units. And because there's so many effects that reduce our dice rolls now, reduce our attacks, reduce our damage, reduce hit rolls and wound rolls, all that stuff creates more opportunities for low rolls. And I think that's really what's hurting us more than anything else. And the fact that we can't shut off wards like some armies can. Our 5-up ward from Gardas is just irrelevant now. Like, don't bother with it. Save stacking is like, unless you're playing 4 Storm Drakes or Karazai, it's not worth save stacking anymore. That mechanic is just invalidated by like Rend 4 OBR or Pretenders, or sorry,
Slanesh.
Invaders. Slanesh hitting you with Rend 5 attacks, like, who cares, right? So a lot of our, like, we're streamlined into a specific number of builds. Frankly, still the most number of builds out of any army. Like, no other army has the amount of builds that Stormcast has. But they're all just falling behind a little bit in terms of mechanics. So that's a very long answer to your question.
It's like the asymmetric balancing I mentioned. Like, it's okay for things to be buffed to be stronger than we are, start out weaker than we are, but when they're start out as strong as us or better, and then they reduce our efficiency. And this is, if you've been listening to our live streams, you know how much we don't like our enhancement section. It might as well not exist, aside from like Signs of the Storm.
Our enhancement section is Arcane Tome.
Enhancements cannot make up for it, right? Like, if you look at the OBR tome, they can easily switch from the negative shooting aura to a auto cast spell aura, or a -3 to charge aura, depending on what meta they're in. We don't have tools to sort of just move that way, and so a debuffing meta that debuffs what we do as what's written on the tin can army really hurts us.
Yep. And that's the struggle right now for Stormcast. Other armies struggle in other ways. I'll let you guys know how Seraphon are struggling. It should be fun, though.
They're struggling when they blow out the opponent's army in the magic phase, and then they're like, oh no, I can't play Age of Sigmar.
Oh no, I didn't kill enough of my opponent's army. Oh, how terrible. Okay, so I think that's a good point to finish up the conversation. What do you guys think? I think before we start descending into just like salt.
Oh, just maybe what can we do? Like, how do we answer power creep? Like, what can you do
that's
if
a
you are
great
facing
topic.
card? How to maintain a good attitude, and like, what feedback can you give to GW? I think is a good.
That's a big one.
That's a big
Giving
one.
feedback.
What I would suggest I think a lot of the power creep can be fixed with point changes, for the record. I think Idoneth, Nighthaunt, and Stormcast can be made viable, like A-tier armies, with the right point costs. All of them. All 3 of those armies can. Some armies, though, I don't think it's going to happen, because you hit a point where eventually point costs get too low, and then you've just swamped the board with trash units, and that's not a good design either. It might make you viable, but it's not a good solution. And frankly, I'd rather have the armies be too weak, because it's better for an army to suck, but at least, this is a terrible take, by the way, it's better for an army to be terrible and bad and weak and nobody wants to play it, but at least it's thematically appropriate and it does what it's supposed to do. I think a worst possible scenario is to have something like Beasts of Chaos or even what Flesh Eater Courts are right now, which is everything has become so cheap that you just have way more stuff and the army wins because you have bodies
Yeah, you
just
just have
clogging up the
more.
board and not because of how your army actually functions. That, I think, is a worst case scenario because the reason I think this is worse is because when the army gets updated, it's a huge change. And I don't think changes that big are warranted. Like, look at how Beasts of Chaos changed
Beasts of
from
Chaos.
second to third. That was a drastic change. They had a very cool concept with third edition, but the army is wildly different from second edition, and I don't think it's a good idea to have jumps that big.
Mm-hmm.
As for what you can do, you can email, what is it, AOS at whatever.
AOS FAQ at GWPLC, I think.
Yeah, you can send them your suggestions. They do read them. They never respond, which is super demoralizing. But they do read them, and they take your feedback into consideration. Right now, I'm
Don't
working.
yell at them. Don't yell at
Yeah.
them.
I'm working on a season 3 point change wish list kind of thing, and I'm going to send that over to them. I recommend people do the same. If you have specific thoughts on units that should be changed, erratas, point costs, anything, you can email them there. And even if nothing happens, well, at least you did your part.
Yeah.
But in terms of gameplay, how would you guys like? Let's talk about that. You're in a game. You're playing against the newest, bestest army, and you're playing like Night Hunt or sorry, James Ideneth. How do you maintain your composure and still play through a proper game?
I want to hear James. Yeah.
At the end of the day, for me, it's just a game. I'll just try to score as much as I can and take the small victories at the end of the day. I had a league game this week. I was against Slaves on Jaws Gallat. It was probably a matchup that was in my favor because it was an Archeon build. I played everything right. Archeon got slapped by 10 thralls to down by 13 wounds, and then my big blob of thralls wiped him off the table. But because I lost every priority roll, I ended up losing the game on tactics. So
Well,
yeah, at the end of the day, it's just sort of maintaining those small victories. So being able to go into the Slaves matchup and take out Archeon, having 6 Varanguard charge me and me wiping out those 6 Varanguard. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have to be more methodical for sure. We've always been a pretty methodical army, but I think that the demand has increased a lot.
I think play has to be a lot tighter, yes. And to that end, I'll say I have 3 solutions. A, you can buy a new army and just join the power creep. But 2, if you are really in love with an army, like, and Paul and I have been playing Stormcast since like the days of Anvil Strike, back when we were really bad in second edition, but we still managed to like beat some of the higher tier armies at the time. Don't worry about winning that much. Play to your outs is what I want to say. Like, don't go into a match thinking I am going to lose this because he's just so much stronger than me. Think about what can I do to make life miserable for this person? Not literally, but like, what can I do to make sure he has to work for this win?
Yes.
Yeah.
If it means you have to play all 5 rounds, because trust me, I have won games where I think I'm losing, and that last 5 round is like a huge point swing for me, and I just win the game. It has happened.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, even if you lose, and at the end of the day, even if you lose, and you will go in knowing you played your heart out, you played all your outs, and it all just came down to dice rolls and mechanics. And I have lost many a game, to the latter, and I don't feel bad about it at the end. I'm like, you know what, this was a fun time. I played an army that very few people are playing. Nobody's playing my kind of list really, and I can do good with it. I know this game. I feel good about that. And just know what it'll come around. Like a year in, I bet you people are going to be complaining about the new Stormcast Terminators or whatever the hell. We're gonna see some salt boys. Like Azir is going to be full of salt.
Yeah, it's gonna be Thunderblast Assault or something.
Yeah, we're gonna have like some
3 times
weird like Pikachu Thunderbolt across the field, like 63 mortal wounds. And some crap like that. So like it'll come around, but yeah, and there's always the option of you just playing play something else. Sometimes you just get bored and you get frustrated with an army's weaknesses, and that's when I feel like, oh, you know what, I'm just getting too negative on this. Like I abandoned my Annihilator list for a bit, and I went and played Fire Slayers. I actually quite like them. There's nothing wrong with that either.
I don't want to tell
make
people
5 friends. Don't go like it's a very good motto. It's like go make 5 friends when you play Age of Sigmar. Don't go for 5.
Yeah.
I don't want to tell people.
What
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, just real quick, just on Murgonk's thing. I like what John Anderson does, where he grabs a song from every opponent.
Yeah.
adds it to a playlist. That's probably my favorite
Yeah.
thing. I love seeing is like Twitter, like hits like this is what I added this weekend.
I don't want to recommend to people buy a new army, but
Yeah.
but it's not a bad thing to have multiple armies, and you know, people have different financial situations. I'm not going to tell you how to spend your hobby money and your hobby time and all that. If you love Stormcast, you're dedicated to Stormcast, or any army that's just too weak right now. If you just love Night Haunt and you're dedicated to it, write it through. People who play the weaker armies always have the most friends, and that's more important than actually winning. It's just like people want to play the game with you again, and that's way more important than winning that game.
Yeah, there's one guy in our local community. He was playing. When I started to play AOS, I started to teach a lot of people AOS at the same time, and there was one guy who came in to the store. He was playing Slanesh, and this was before their new book, and he was playing Slanesh for the whole year. He has probably won the most sportsmanship awards at the tournaments that we've been going to because he's just such a relaxed guy.
Yeah, absolutely, totally.
And his name is not Anthony.
No.
Oh,
So yeah, just try to have fun with the game. Just realize it's not always about winning, and eventually
Mm-hmm.
the balance gods will come around, and
Eventually, you
get
will
nice
be
armies.
overpowered, and you can sit
Yeah.
there just like waiting, biding your time, waiting for the day your battle tome gets updated. Because if Gloomspike Gits can go from worst to first, anything's possible.
And the
Yeah.
thing is, at the end of the day, if you're playing those difficult matchups with your book that is underpowered, you're becoming a stronger player at the end of the day, and you're going to be a friggin' knife when you're done and you have that powerful book at the end of the day.
It's like that scene in Naruto where Gaara, what's his name, Rock Lee takes off his Rock Lee takes off his training weights, and like everyone's like, "Oh, what is that?" And it just like destroys the ground, and huge pillars of smoke come up. That's
We're gonna have that meme.
Yeah,
when the new
we should
SEU
do that
book
with
comes
Stormcast
out.
for sure.
Yeah, new book comes out. We're just dropping the old tome.
We gotta hire an artist to make memes because this would be an amazing shirt. Like you could have like the bricks in the air, and it would be like 4th edition book incoming.
Yeah.
Also, consider this: if you play the weakest armies that nobody else is playing, you can do some off-meta thing that they can't be expecting.
Oh
Because
yeah,
if they're expecting the meta, and you show up with something that just like gets in those angles, you can really mess up some like meta chasers day.
and Scions and Translocation are excellent for that. If you play a very tight positioning game and you understand, like if you're like a master of the basics of Age of Sigmar, Stormcast can take you very far. They play positioning so much better than any other army. Like purposeful, precise positioning with no room for mistakes. But if you nail it the first time,
I was about to say.
yeah, if you nail it that first time, you're gonna feel great.
Yeah.
All right. So that's good.
Yeah.
Thank you everybody for tuning in to our discussion about live stream. Hopefully it wasn't too just us complaining about nonsense. But there's definitely been some power creep, and we've talked about every aspect of it.
And thanks for the 69 votes for Caradron Overlord, showing that they are
nice.
They are in fact the most OP army in the game right now.
Fantastic.
It's just, yeah. Oh man, we could really rant, but it's not worth it.
All right, so usual goodbye stuff here. If you think we missed anything, feel free to leave a comment in the video underneath it. If you want to talk about AOS all day long, every day, you can join our Discord server. We've got a link in the description. We post battle reports there. We talk about models. We post finished models, work in progress models, general hobby chat. Our community contests are there. Obviously, if you're watching this stream, you know that by now. So if you want to enter your Dracoths in the Painting Dracoth contest, you can do it there. Consider supporting us by becoming a member on YouTube. Thank you, Lewis, for becoming a member today, buddy. Or joining us on patreon.com/stormkeep. You can get early access to videos. You can get access to the slides in PDF form. So, for example, we had somebody who brought the How to Counter Tzeentch slides to an event and played against Tzeentch, and he was able to quick reference using the slides, and he claims that it helped him win. So, there you go. Testimony.
Patreon or YouTube are both the same. We have our own private chat. We have an awesome little list build workshop. So just different little things we try to offer to peeps that help support us and get us some better gear. And why Bergonk doesn't sound like a robot.
Yeah, if you have any feedback for what you'd like to see as rewards for becoming a member, we're always looking for more feedback. I feel like we're not doing enough for people who throw money at us. It's always like a weird feeling that people just throw money at us and we're not doing enough. Coming up next on the podcast, we have a full review of OCR Bone Reapers. I just got to sit down and edit the thing together. We have a full, like, these are like 5-hour reviews. Blades of Corn coming as well, and a full review for Seraphon. And then we're also going to be working on a quick review for Soul Blight Gravelords. And hopefully once this batch of battletomes is all done and reviewed, we can go on to doing more analytical content like we're used to doing on the channel. It's just, these are fun to do. Like, it's fun doing battletome reviews. It's a lot of work, but it's very rewarding.
You learn quite a bit about the armies. It's very eye-opening, but also like good tournament prep.
Oh yeah, I know these armies better than my opponent will now at this point.
Some cases, yeah.
All right, so that's it from us. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Have yourselves a wonderful night.